Hello, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Johnny Baghead, as always, and I hope you're having a good Saturday, everyone. Yes, I'm back. It's me. Yes, it is I. We are back. I'm all bagged up. Yes, and we are here to rank fucking PlayStation 2 games, mate. This is our third part. If you missed the previous parts, we'll go over the tiers a bit. But yep, this has been a long task. Now, okay, two things. So yes, there are a lot of PlayStation 2 games. In fact, there are over 4,000 if you include every territory's like unique releases where they didn't come out in other regions. I think I've probably ranked, not, you know, we put a lot into the, you know, like, haven't played as much, but I've still gone through and talked about maybe like 1,000 games or something. We've got a couple hundred left, not much though. Some that I know are gonna be, you know, talk about later kind of thing. But we have a decent chunk in there. Yeah, let's swap over. Here's my tier list. Let me just get my music going. Just checking out my levels. Yeah, I'm happy with those. Okay. Right. So I do have a couple of quick modifications to make to the tier list because some stuff has happened since the last time I did the tier list. The first thing I'm going to want to do though is I thought about it more. Oh, hold on. Let me move my keyboard a bit. I'm going to put Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 in great. I feel like putting them in the play elsewhere category is maybe underselling that they are still totally playable and fine on the original PlayStation 2. And I want to, you know, I just want to highlight more games. Like, a lot of games that are in here are great games where playing them on PS2 sucks. And playing those on PlayStation 2 does not really suck. That's not fair. And I gotta... There, I gotta turn my headphones down a bit. So yeah, I can't put these in masterpieces. That might ruffle some feathers. That might rustle someone's jimmies. But Kingdom Hearts 1 has a lot of like stiffness. It also has some weird stuff when it comes to the synthesis shop. Of like, oh well, how do you get this item? Oh well, you have to fight this optional boss that there's no in-game explanation to how it spawns, so you gotta like follow a guide, and that's the only way to find it. There's a lot of what feels like designed to sell guidebooks stuff in Kingdom Hearts 1, and Kingdom Hearts 2 has great gameplay, but it's it's got some sort of story. Hey, welcome to the stream, PS2 or Die. What did I say? What did I say about Kingdom Hearts? I said it's great. But yeah, not quite masterpieces for me. It's a minor thing, but I really don't like in Kingdom Hearts 2 how the block works. It's like that game is like on the verge of being like a stylish action RPG, but then there's a lot of the stuff that holds it back, like a lot of the stuff in the air combat being like automated. And you have to block, like, really far ahead. You can't do it on reaction. Though, funny enough, there is a mod. There's like an entire rework of the game you can play in emulator, which I believe is called something like Nobody May Cry, which is, yes, literally turning the game into, like, a Devil May Cry clone, where it has, like, style switching and a style meter, and new moves, and moves tweaked, and encounters tweaked, and bosses changed around, and all kinds of stuff. It looks awesome. It looks amazing. And I want to play it at some point. I believe you can publicly play it now, but it's still technically not finished, but it is like most of the games there. Okay. And also, I have now finished Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, and I know where I want to put this. Oh yeah, no, this is a very weird tier list. I'm sure of it. Like, some are going to be obvious, but also, like, I'm the kind of person who's like, oh, these rhythm games, masterpieces. You know, oh, this snowboarding game. You know, I get there's weird stuff. These light gun games, because again, I still think these are like some of the best ever made. But yeah, Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, the PlayStation 2 version. I'll explain all the tiers just to recap in case anyone missed them. So the reason for this, so if this was a PSP tier list that was just judging PSP games, I would say that Vice City Stories is a masterpiece. However, with PlayStation 2, I think the criteria is a little different because the console is capable of a bit more. Now, the PlayStation 2 version of Vice City Stories is a great conversion. It looks better. It's got a decent chunk of like extra content. They added a bunch of races and some rampages and 1 or 2 side missions, but it's mainly that kind of content. However, some of the PSP trappings that would be more forgivable on that console weren't really adjusted for the PS2 version enough, in my opinion, to make it a masterpiece. But it's so close. The writing is, honestly, I think better than San Andreas. It both hits this point of like harking back to Vice City, but it's got the kind of serious, grounded tone that Grand Theft Auto 4 had, and you can feel like this was almost like a testing ground for that kind of writing. But the shooting controls are a step back from San Andreas, and they didn't adjust them much for PS2. So it's still, you're pretty much auto-lock-in. You have free aim, but the aiming is just, it's like really hard to aim precisely. You can't move while free aiming. The auto-lock has a really bad habit of just locking on to random people. It's supposed to have this like threat system where it can tell, oh, we'll lock onto only people who are shooting at you. No, that's not true at all. You can be in a gunfight, you can kill like 2 gang members in front of you. There's a third one here, and then suddenly the lock-on will swap to someone on the other side of the street that you're not even facing, you know? And you can't set it to like only target enemies I'm looking at either. But stuff like summon a movement and stuff like that isn't really tweaked up. But the actual story and the missions are great. A lot of the adjustments to kind of, even though some of the adjustments were done for PSP's sake, like taking the stuff like paramedic and vigilante and adding checkpoints so you don't have to get to, you know, if you want to get the rewards from them, you don't have to in one run go from level 1 to level 15. You can do it in chunks. That's great. Heck, it's weird that that's the first time they ever did it. Because, man, that would have been good in, like, any of the Grand Theft Auto games. But then some of the more kind of basic stuff, you know, like the whole kind of state empire real estate system is really cool. Which, from what I can tell, based on a recent video by VanMM, is possibly based on cut content, like from early cut content from San Andreas, where there was supposed to be like a real estate side to it, and each like business type has like missions tied to it, but you don't get cutscenes, unfortunately, like original Vice City, where, you know, like each business you brought had like a specific owner who would give you missions. I wish that was there as well. But like Liberty City Stories was like cool, in terms of like, oh, the fact you know, you're driving around and it's got all that kind of Grand Theft Auto stuff that was running on PSP. But the missions and the story and the cutscenes are very basic. Like, you only get a little bit of motion capture stuff. Vice City Stories has such a more engrossing story and great characters and fun cameos, both real life cameos and also just bit people who are playing roles and things like that. There's some really fun characters in it. Obviously, you go back to any of these Grand Theft Auto games with their edgy writing from the 2000s, some of it doesn't hold up. But I think it's kind of more serious, grounded take on, like, the fucked up gangster world really shines through. And if there was, like, if there was, like, a tier right between here, I would probably put Vice City Stories there. But here, now that I've done my adjustments, we'll quickly go through what my tiers mean, and then we will finish ranking these games. Masterpieces, these are like must play. These are defining games for the system. Even if you can play them on other systems, they are totally fine on PlayStation 2. And I think like these games hold up so well. They were so groundbreaking for what they did. Great games are like just below that. They're great, but there are little bits that hold them back. So I can't quite call them masterpieces. Goods are still, you know, fairly enjoyable, have a lot of good things going to them, but are like definitely, there's some back and forth of like, this thing's done right, this thing's done wrong, you know. Mid games are ones where I can't call them bad, but they're just like, they work, they do what they're kind of intended to for the most part, but that's about all I can really say for them. Or and you know, obviously I have to say this, but this should be obvious. Obviously this is all subjective because our media critique and opinions, it's subjective. That's how this works. But this more so is not even me judging them on like what my idea of good or bad games is. This is very personal for me. Of like, these are games that you could technically say are good games or great games, but I find personally mid. Bad but good is a special tier for games that I think are not good, but that element of them makes them fun and interesting. Or, you know, they're way more flawed in their design, but like what they were going for kind of helps hold them up. And then the just bad ones are games that are just rubbish. You can maybe enjoy them ironically, but nothing really shines through. And some of these games I just straight up do not like. And then, yeah, the great play elsewhere. This is a list of games where these are great games. Some of these I would even classify as masterpieces, like Resident Evil 4, the Max Paynes, Outrun, 2006, but these are not the versions to play. Like, especially 2024, outside of just, I want to see how busted these versions are, don't play these versions. You know, either they have like an abysmal frame rate, or the visual quality is so far removed, or, you know, like so far downgraded from like the main platform, or a lot of features were cut back kind of thing to make it run on PS2. The plan to play, these are games that I specifically know at some point I'm going to play, and in fact I have a plan. We'll talk about it a bit more at the end, but I have a plan where I want to start a roulette names out of a bag system where we actually will just randomly pick a name, and then that game will come out and I'll play it, you know? So like, I'll pull a name out, and granted some of these are going to show up in other categories of stuff I want to stream, like the survival horror games are already on the list, a lot of the hack and slash ones. But say I pull a name out and like Medal of Honor comes out, and I just try Medal of Honor for the first time, you know? Same with the might play. These are ones that I'm not entirely sold on playing, but I have put some of these. Also, this song is like way louder. Hang on a sec. Why is this Kinsfield song like... There we go. I don't know why that Kinsfield song's like way louder than the rest. And then need to play more, which I've... one that I do want to move is Rumble Roses, because I actually realised that I've not played Rumble Roses. I'm not sure why it was there. But these are games that I have played a little bit to various extents, but I've not finished them or played enough to form an opinion on. Or I've played them on different platforms. And for that reason, it's like, well, I can't really judge the PS2 version until I've got more hands on it. And I don't like to rank games if I've not played most of the game. You know, you want to play enough to really... You know, technically, if I was ever reviewing games, like most games, if you want to review them, require multiple playthroughs and really dive in deep into a game. But even on a list as casual as this, like some of these I definitely need to play more. And some of these, it's like we will stream as well. Like we'll start from the beginning kind of thing. And then this is the games we have less to rank, minus these three at the end, because these are duplicates that I can't delete from this template I made. But, and let's start. Oni. I actually have played a bit of Oni, but it was a very long time ago, and I don't really remember what I think of it. Really interesting game, made by, like, a one-time separate entity of Bungie, and published by Rockstar Games of all studios. Like, just very interesting, fascinating. And like not one of the earliest, but definitely an early PlayStation 2 attempt to kind of a Western studio trying to map the Japanese anime aesthetic in a game. But yeah, I definitely have not played anywhere close to enough. Like, I feel like I've only played the training mission in Oni. So I really don't know what it's like. Okay. Onimusha, I missed when it was current, but I definitely want to go through these games. So these are going in the plan to play, and we even have like a really good HD remaster of Onimusha 1, though maybe we'll play like the PlayStation 2 original just to kind of compare. Plus, you know, I've got the original hardware, we can. Like, I own, I think, at least, like, one or two of these that I've tried just to make sure my copies work. But I don't really count that as, like, played enough to start making a judgment on. Now, mainly, there's a couple of games in these lists that I've, like, loaded up a little bit in my off time to kind of test them and kind of test the waters. I've messed a bit with LA Rush, Area 51, GoldenEye Rogue Agent, stuff like that. Manhunt 2, I've played a bit, which I'm not sure how I feel about that game. I already don't have high opinions of the first one. Same with Pac-Man World. I definitely missed out on these. I might have played like a PlayStation 2 demo. But I do want to check them out. They seem like really fun 3D platform collectathons. Pac-Man World 3 in particular seems to be like a Ratchet & Clank game almost, which is fascinating to me. Alright, Persona 3. So, for this one, I'm probably going to rank this kind of including... So, this is going to be specifically about the game versions based on the PS2 version. So nothing about the remake, because I haven't played it or really seen any of it outside of like a trailer. But here we're going to judge this based on the original release, the FES release, and the PSP version, which also got a PC release a couple of years ago. And I think on that, I can say this is a great game. I don't think I can call this a masterpiece. Because some of the PS2 stuff is really rough to go back to. Compared to like where Persona was taken from. But it might have like my favorite kind of like story and tone. It's a bit darker than where the series went afterwards. Like Persona 4 has a way more kind of high school hijinksy fun time. Despite like the serious topic, like that's more the tone. But Persona 3 feels very like downer, insidious, like there's a insidious undertone to the whole thing. And you don't get as much of the wacky kind of, oh, we're gonna go to the hot springs, we're gonna go on a camping trip, that kind of stuff. I'm currently on and off. I've been doing it for years. I'll like pick up the PSP version and I'll play for like an hour or two, maybe 3, every so often, and then come back to it. But weirdly enough, the PSP version is really good for that. The PSP version strips out like all the 3D areas outside of the dungeons. So you're basically like the rest of the game becomes like visual novel. So like navigation and stuff like that's really quick. And it has a lot of the Persona 4 enhancements. Like you can actually individually control your other party members. There's extra follow-up attacks. There's more control in fusing personas and counting abilities over. Stuff like that. And Persona 4... I have to think on this one. Because Persona 4 is amazing. I think it does have a great story and a great system. I'm just... Oh, this is a hard one. I think I'm going to put it in great. And here's why. And this is maybe one where if someone was counting Persona 4 Golden, that might technically rank higher. Which I have started that version. But I wanted to make sure to finish Persona 3 Portable first before getting more into that one. I think some elements of Persona 4's writing has not aged well. More so than Persona 3. Look, when this game came out, which was 2008, especially for a game made in Japan, which in the 80s to like 2000s did not have a great reputation where it came to LGBTQ plus representation. Like your options were either like lewd to hentai, which was like, you know, typically made, you know, that was not made as like a pro LGBT stuff. It's, you know, it's pornographic, or, you know, it was more like punchlines of jokes, kind of punching down kind of humor. And Persona 4 still has remnants of that. But there's a lot of attempts at trying to tell stories about LGBTQ plus characters and themes in a more positive light. But there are some problems with it. I kind of don't want to go into it too much because it does spoil things. But there are definitely characters, and look, some people are not going to agree with me on this, and it's totally fine. I think Persona 4 has a problem where they wrote characters that were, I believe the phrase is known as queer-coded, where it's, you basically write them like they're in a specific party of, you know, the LGBTQ plus umbrella, but you don't actually write out the part where you say, this character's gay, this character's trans, this character's bi, etc. And there are a couple of characters that they do that with, or specifically kind of write them to be like, oh, we're writing them like they're gay, and then they get to a certain point and go, actually, no, they're not. Or, oh, this character could be trans, oh, they're not. And then there's some kind of unfortunate stuff of like, oh, when it comes out that this character, their gender expression is opposite to their gender, there's a lot of, like, weird humor about, like, other characters kind of forcing them to gender conformity that I think nowadays is, like, and it doesn't feel like the commentary is supposed to be, like, these people suck for doing this. It's a bit, there's a bit of, like, goofy ha-ha to it. And, like, some of it I think you could recontextualize. There's kind of like a running gag where the one male character is, like, I don't want to say homophobic. I think they have, like, legitimate homophobia. Like, they're actually scared of gay people. And it's against a character who is, like, not actually gay, according to the canon. Because it kind of cops out. And I think you can look at that in modern context of, like, okay, look, this is a person who, like, this part of them sucks. And it's recognized. They have likable traits, but this is a part of the character that, like, as they grow older, they would have to deal with and confront, kind of thing. And they're the asshole in the situation. And I kind of do hope that Persona 4 gets a similar treatment that Persona 3 Remake did. Just because I think you could tell a more interesting story now. I don't want to say it's that far. Like, oh, a Japanese company. It's there definitely is some cultural thing of, like, where, you know, like, LGBT discussions were in the 2000s, and this is why I said earlier, also welcome to the stream, this is why I said earlier about how they felt queer-coded but written to be canonly not queer. I kind of wonder if some of that was the only way to kind of get the game released. If it was like, oh, okay, if you put these characters and just say they're gay, they're queer, they're LGBTQ, that's going to, like, make this game harder to market, it's not going to sell well. But if you kind of write them this way, but then write in the canon they're not, you can get away with it, you know? Again, I don't want to go into spoilers, so I won't say which characters I'm talking about. But, and there's some of the writing as well. Like, there's a big theme about people kind of being trapped in their own lives and not being able to break out. But a couple of the characters, like, they kind of play it both ways, where they end up going, actually, I'm fine, I'm trapped. Like, my whole personality was about how I was being forced into this life, but now I like it. It's like, what? Like, the writing sometimes contradicts itself, which to be fair, I've heard Persona 5 has a similar problem, where it's got this kind of rebel against the system message, but at the same time, it's also about upholding the establishment. It's a bit weird. But in terms of, like, an RPG, obviously, taking the kind of fantasy RPG format and putting it into, like, a contemporary setting with RPG writing is so interesting. Obviously, they've been doing it for a while, but I think it comes together the best in Persona 4 in building it's the small village and the characters in, like, the characters are a lot more fun. It's a lot more fun time than Persona 3. I'm just a bit of a goth boy, so Persona 3 speaks to me a bit more. But it's got really fun characters and gameplay. And the soundtrack in both Persona 3 and 4 are amazing. I think Persona 4 probably has the slightly better soundtrack overall as well. Though honestly, I think nowadays, if you're going to play any version, you would probably play Persona 4 Golden, because it adds so much to the game. It adds entire new areas and quests and dungeons and extra seasons to the story mode. Like, it adds like multiple vacations, like a ski resort and a place where you could drive scooters, like go travel to a city and things like that, and fashion stuff. It's cool. But I can't quite call it a masterpiece, because I think in modern like, if I was judging this when it came out, I probably would. but I don't think I can for, you know, in modern context. And I do want to judge these games to say that in the modern context, these hold up. These are masterpieces in this context. Or whatever. But I think I'm confident with that. Alright. The pinball collections. We actually streamed these when I did that random stream where I just played all the PS2 pinball games. These are both great. I would say the Williams collection is the better of the two. It's the more fleshed out one. But they're both just great collections of pinballs. They're done really lovingly. They're really high quality scans and recreations, giving you histories of the tables when they were made and the story behind their production, and giving you like full explanations for how they work. And there's so many little mini challenges and unknockables and things like that. Just two great collections. Granted, they're on a ton of platforms. The Williams one specifically was on like next gen as well, and also PSP and stuff like that. But pretty much anywhere you play this, you're gonna have a good time. The PSP version is probably the one where, outside of playing on in the tables, it looks the most scuffed. But these are still really good. All right, and then, aha. So I'm not sure which Pirates game this is. I believe this is the one that not developed, but published by Bethesda, because every so often they would randomly publish games at this time. But me and my nephew have played a bit of this one, and it's actually pretty good. And they managed to actually get Johnny Depp for it. They actually and I think the other actors as well. They managed to get everyone for it. But there's a couple of these that me and my nephew have played that have like co-op, I believe, that we need to play more of. But they seem really good. But again, we've only like played them for about a couple of hours, so I've definitely not played enough to say. Alright, Primal, I need to know more about it. And the same with Project Eden. Some of these were already on the tier list we started with. But I do want to, you know, there's a lot of just... This is why a lot of these are on here. There's a lot of just amazing PlayStation 2 games that are considered classics by a lot of people, or hidden gems and things like that I want to give an honest chance. But I'm not sure how much of a chance some of these. Okay, Psyops, the Mindgate Conspiracy. That's definitely going to be a plan to play. I hear great things about this game, but I never actually played it. The one I was more familiar with was Second Sight, which was made by the Free Radical Design, the Time Splitters devs. And I think I used to think that they were the same game, but no, this is a different one. But this is definitely going to be a pick out of the hat play game one day. Same with Psychonauts, which I think I actually own like multiple versions of this, much like Beyond Good and Evil. No, I haven't actually played this, but this has always been on my like plan to play. I've heard great things about it. There are a lot of Double Fine developed games that I do love, so I feel like I would really like this, but I've just never gotten around to it. And this one, I think Quake 3 was already on this list, but I actually have a physical copy of this on PS2. I just want to check this out. I'm really curious how a PS2 version of this plays. Like, you know, it seems to have a slightly different name on PS2. I want to see, like, did they change any content? Does it have mouse and keyboard like the Dreamcast version? Can you play online with PC players like the Dreamcast version? I'm just fascinated. Okay. So all the Ratchet and Clank games are also going to go into the plan to play. Now, I didn't get into Ratchet and Clank until the PS3 era. I'd always like tried demos and things like that and kind of got an idea. But when I got the PS3, which I believe I got a PS3, I want to say it was like maybe 2007. It definitely wasn't at launch. but it was maybe 2007. It was definitely before Metal Gear Solid 4 had come out, which was 2008. So I'd have to look up when Ratchet and Clank Future, the first one, Tools of Destruction, came out. But I loved the two, like the mainline ones on PlayStation 3, which was Tools of Destruction and A Crack in Time. And also the PS4 game, which is kind of a retelling slash remake of the first Ratchet and Clank. Though some people have told me that the first Ratchet and Clank actually is better than that version. But this is a series I've always wanted to go back to, for sure. So these are just all going on there. Also, we'll find like a couple of other, I think like Secret Agent Clank is on this list. So that's going to go on there. So same with these Rayman games. These I do want to play. And so which ones have I played in Rayman? So the Rayman games I've played is I think I either rented or I used to own the PS1 version of Rayman 1. But I was really bad at it. I don't remember getting very far in it at the time. And I remember trying demos of them, but we recently, in a PlayStation grab bag, like a month or two ago, played the PS1 version of Rayman 2. And I kind of, while we were doing that, I looked up some stuff and saw how, like, every version, like, N64, PlayStation, Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, PC, are all slightly different games with, like, original content, different levels, layouts, and things like that. So I want to check out the PS2 version, and I just want to check out these other ones as well. But the Rayman games I've played the most of is Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends, which are the 2D side-scrolling platforms with the hand-drawn art style. Those are great. Those are must-plays, but those are like PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4 onward games. Rayman Legends especially. Rayman Legends is top-notch. It's one of the best, like, modern takes on a side-scrolling platform I've played. I'm not sure. I know this is RC something. I forget which RC game this is. Not sure if I'd play that one. I need to do a bit more research on it. Aha! The first Red Dead Revolver. So I have actually messed with this a little bit in my off time. I was surprised to find out that it is not an open world Grand Theft Auto style game. It is level based. It is like a series of shootouts. Though at the same time, it does still have some of the Red Dead trappings. Like, it has the Deadeye system and the draw system and stuff like that. I have a feeling that you would not want to play the PS2 version because I remember it running really badly. But we need to check it out more. No, Jebediah Zachary's told me that he's interested in playing this because apparently it speaks to his freedom mindset, whatever that fucking means. I don't know. I don't get that guy. But one of us will check it out at some point, you know. But yeah, I've only played like an hour of it, so that's really not enough to say. Oh, there's another game that's on the list twice. Whoops. We've already ranked Resident Evil Dead Aim. Okay, the Red Factions I've not played. But I do want to check out these PS2 versions. So from what I understand, they're not really the versions to play. You would probably play them on PC. But again, just another series I missed out on at the time that I want to go back to. Oh, yes. Okay. This one I didn't know about. But this is the first sequel to Resident Evil Gun Survivor. Now, Resident Evil Gun Survivor on PlayStation 1 is not a good game, also known as Resident Evil Survivor. It was an attempt to make a Resident Evil game that could use the GunCon 45 light gun controller for the PlayStation 1. But it's really poorly made. It doesn't really utilize that whole control scheme very well. For example, even like Time Crisis 1, where you shoot enemies affects them. Like if you shoot them in the leg, they have a different animation than if you shoot them in the head or the torso or the arm. And, you know, House of Dead 1 has that with zombies and dismemberment. Resident Evil Gun Survivor has none of that. It doesn't... You can shoot zombies in the head, in the knee, in their wrist, and they take the same amount of damage. The game is, like, mostly... Like, it has branching paths, but then once you pick a path, it's kind of just a straight path. It's, like, not a great story. It's really badly acted, even for the time. Like, it's maybe worse than Resident Evil 1 acting. And then, if you played the US version, they got rid of the fucking light gun controls, because there was a weird moral panic around video game light guns at the time. But I found out there was a PS2 sequel that specifically only came out in Japan and Europe that is based on Code Veronica. And I want to give it an honest try. But with a lot of the light gun stuff that's on here, I'm going to try and stream when I can get a CRT screen that I can keep on the desk over here. That will, like, a smaller one that will fit on the desk. Because that's honestly my better option. Instead of, like, emulating and then getting, like, the Sinden light guns that cost, like, hundreds. That's the way I want to do it. But that's the plan. Now, I want to check. I feel like I already put Biohazard on this tier list. Let me see. Did I put them? Maybe I didn't. Let me just quickly peruse the list. Okay, but Resident Evil Outbreak, File 1 and 2. I did play a little bit. I mostly watched my sister play the Outbreak games. But fun, goofy, haha, hee fact about the PAL release of Resident Evil File Outbreak. At least File 1. I can't remember if they did this for File 2. File 1 does not have online multiplayer. They completely removed it from the game. The main fucking gimmick. Now, granted, you can still enjoy them offline, but again, it's the main gimmick. Yeah, I guess I forgot to put it back on there. But this is kind of including both of them, but I do want to play these, but I want to do it online with people and get, like, the full experience to really judge them. Rez. Yes, Rez. Rez feels like a game I would probably really like. It is, like a rhythm shooting game. It's like a rhythm game kind of crossed with the Panzer Dragoon style. And it is made by a developer. He's, like, the guy behind, Lumines and some other games that I really like. Tetris Effect is probably his most recent project. And maybe the PS2 version isn't the one to play anymore, because this game has had, like, multiple, like, remasters at this point. But that's one I want to check out. Ridge Racer 5. Funny enough, PS2 or die. I requested for him to play through this game, and he did recently. But I need to play more of it. Actually, you know what? I have played some of it, so I need to put this under here. But I actually want to go through not only the championship mode, but try the other modes where a lot of the other unlockables are. Because you can get through the championship mode in like 5 to 6 hours. Maybe less than that, actually. You could probably do it in 3 to 4 hours, honestly. It's weird, like that part's... It's... I've played various little bits of Ridge Racer games. Ridge Racer 5 was a launch title for the PlayStation 2, and it's quite stripped down. It has a really small track list compared to the previous ones. Like Ridge Racer like 1, 2, 3, that kind of era was kind of small, but Ridge Racer Type 4 had a bigger track, like a slightly bigger track list than 5. 5 like went backwards, and it was mostly old tracks, like just Ridge Racer 1 and Ridge Racer Revolution tracks. But I do want to try like all the dual modes and the endurance modes and that kind of stuff, just to give it a proper go and see like how the whole package is. But I have a feeling that this would probably end up somewhere around here, because it is just such a stripped down Ridge Racer package, but it is still Ridge Racer, you know? Alright, Robot Wars. I actually have messed with this a little bit in my off time just to check it out. I believe I had the Game Boy Color version of this game, which was not good. Probably should not have been made. So Robot Wars is a UK show that is literally the UK version of BattleBots. You know, where like engineers would make weird robots from like scrap parts of things like that and compete in these like televised competitions. I messed with this recently. This is like closer to a simulation, because you actually, though there seems to be a way to unlock famous robots from the show, the main gimmick is like you build your robot, and it's got a really deep customization system. You know, like you pick your basic shape and materials and weapons and where you put them and things like that. Seems really impressive what you're allowed to do. But again, I've only played it for about an hour or two. But that's definitely gonna show up on stream at some point. Rogue Galaxy. I'll put it here for now. I need to do a bit more research on this game. I believe it is a JRPG, but I don't know enough about it to say anything. Rumble Racing is a game I want to try, because this, and I believe Shocks, which I also have on this list, I'm pretty sure. Maybe I don't, actually. But they're like EA Sports big style racing games that I want to check out, that aren't Burnout. They're interesting. Oh yeah, Second Sight, here we go. Definitely need to try this. I believe, if it's not, I think this game is like a survival horror game mostly. But it's really interesting, made by the Time Splitters devs, and I found out recently that this was actually the first game they pitched when they formed, and was originally the game they were supposed to be making for IDOS instead of Time Splitters. But this kind of got put on the back burner when Time Splitters kind of took over as their main thing. I definitely played a demo of this, but it's interesting because it's completely different tonally. You know, Time Splitters was always tongue-in-cheek, parody, goofy stuff. Second Sight is not. Second Sight is like deadly serious, even though it's like the same art style. And from what I remember, this was like a kind of a physicsy showcase game, and I think that's why Time Splitters Future Perfect has the kind of like physics grabber thing. Also, I think obviously like Half-Life 2 had come out, and a lot of games kind of in this era were trying to kind of do their version of the gravity gun. Here you go, there's Secret Agent Clank, originally made for PSP but got a PS2 version here. We'll put this alongside the Ratchet and Clank games, because again, I've not played any of the PS2 ones. This one, Serious Sam, the next account, I've actually played a little bit of this just to try it out. From what I can gather, because I've not played much Serious Sam, I think I've only like messed with it a tiny bit, but this is a kind of loose interpretation of Serious Sam 1, but with like original levels and story. But it is quite impressive. Now, there are a couple of Serious Sam games on console from this era, but from what I understand, each one is a bit different. They're not like just straight ports of each other kind of thing. It's not like a multi-platform release. But it does seem like an interesting take on the series to kind of scale the game down on the PS2, and but it still kind of emulates the formula really well. I was quite impressed with it. But again, I've only played a little bit. Alright, I believe these are the Shadow Hearts games, which a friend of mine has always told me I would like. I've just not gone around to them. But these are ones that I want to try at some point. Same with this one. I think it's called Shadow of Memories. It's a very weird adventure game that Konami made kind of early into the PS2 era. And I say like adventure as in like Alone in the Dark, what's it called? Broken Sword, Discworld, Monkey Island, like that, but like 3D movement. But it's got like a time loop where you kind of keep repeating the same couple of days over and over and trying to get different things to happen. And I want to give it a try as well. Oh yes, same with Shadow of Rome. The reason why I want to try this one, and I believe I played a demo, or if I didn't play a demo, there was definitely a gameplay demonstration on one of the official UK PlayStation 2 magazine demos that I used to have. The reason I want to check this game out is this game, despite how different of a setting it is a prototype. It's like prototyping what they would eventually do with Dead Rising. Just straight up, it's like an early version of the MT Frameworks engine. It has a lot of the same like animation style and dismemberment tech, and like picking up a lot of like environmental objects and things like that. So I've always been meaning to try this one, just because I love Dead Rising so much. Aha! Shadow the Hedgehog. I feel confident in doing this. This is not a good game. Admittedly, I've not played it all the way through. Though, technically playing it all the way through, you have to get like every ending. But it's such a janky game. Like, here's the thing. Just bad does not mean these games are not likable or enjoyable. But I wouldn't categorize this in the bad but good thing, because I don't think just the whole, like... Obviously, it's trying stuff with all the multiple story paths. But God, it's such a dumb game when you really think about it. Just like, yeah, we're going to make this, like, grittier Sonic game where you have guns and shit. It's so... It's still hilarious remembering this happened, you know? Like, around this time, they really did not know what to do with the Sonic franchise. Remember, this was a year before Sonic 06. And then before then, like, Sonic was... I think after Sonic Adventure 2, they really were just... For a while, were just really, like, not really sure what to do. Like, you had Sonic Heroes, which I kind of remember fondly, but I don't know if it holds up very well. And then there was the Sonic Riders games as well. The, like, hoverboard ones with the fucking birds that you race against and all that. Maybe I'll change my mind on this. That's the thing. This list, I could easily play more games or revisit games and change my mind. But a lot of this I'm also basing off of a friend of mine who's played this, who's told me, like, who likes Sonic, and they've said, like, no, this is the worst playing one. And they've played 06. Which is some feat. I've played Sonic 06 all the way through. That game is not good. Though obviously a game of circumstance more than anything. Oh yeah, the I believe these are Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner. These two. I don't know if I'll play these. A lot of these, like, longer RPGs. And I believe these are all Shin Megami Tensei games here. I'm not sure if I would ever get around to these. Though I do know one of these features Dante from the Devil May Cry series. But, you know, there's a lot of Shin Megami Tensei games on the PlayStation 2. You know, I've unfortunately only played the Persona ones. But, you know, there's always a chance. And I don't want to prejudge anything. Shinobi, I definitely want to try. And it's going to be part of Action Sack properly. There's also a spiritual successor to this made by the same devs, but it's not called Shinobi 2. But these are kind of spiritual successors to, like, some Mega Drive games, I believe. This scarf, as you can see on the title here, from what I remember, was, like, one of the key features, like, them doing their scarf simulation stuff was, like, a big part of the game. Ah, yeah, here we go. So right now, a lot of these are gonna be ones I have not played. Sly Raccoon, I definitely missed out on. I have played demos of them. I really do want to play them. Either these versions or the HD version, but unfortunately with a lot of the PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3 conversions, they end up having issues, and some of them aren't even that well documented how much issues they have. But I've always wanted to go back to the Sly games. I definitely played demos and really liked them. And I've liked some of the stuff. Oh, hang on, why did my music end? But I've liked some of the other stuff that Sucker Punch has done. Weird, I don't know why there's some pause there. There we go, we're back. But yeah. And I know there's a fourth one as well, which I didn't hear much about. I hope it's good. But that's on a... I think that's a PS3 game, or is it a PS4 game? I forget. Smuggler's Run. This was, again, another one that I missed out on. I've only played them a tiny bit, but not enough to say how I feel about them. But these are made by the Midnight Club devs. Though they're quite different games. Though they're quite early ones as well. They look pretty rough. They're impressive in some ways because they're really early PlayStation 2 games. And they have a really big draw distance. Like, they don't... You can see the entire map all at once. But obviously the map's very low fidelity to get that to work on a PlayStation 2. But this is like a series that I hear a lot of Rockstar fans kind of lament has just disappeared. There's these two games and then the GameCube one, and then that's kind of it. Same with like Midnight Club. Though Midnight Club at least lasted a bit longer. Oh yeah, the SOCOM games. Definitely missed out on these back in the day because I never had the PlayStation 2 network adapter. And when I tried to get internet access before I had a PC to use it on the PS2, our like phone provider was insistent it would not work. I don't think they were telling the truth. They kept telling me like, no, you have to have a PC because you have to set it up on PC first. It won't work on the console because it has to run through the PC, which it doesn't. I just think they were completely wrong. I think it was just like they wanted to sell us their PC software as well. But I want to go back and check all these out. From what I understand as well, like SOCOM 2 or SOCOM 3, people still play online. They play on fan servers. And it's still really popular. Ah, Sonic Heroes. Sonic Heroes. Sonic Heroes I have actually played. But God, I have not played it in so long. I've got to think on this one. I remember it being fun. It might... I have to replay it. I might change my mind. But I remember it being okay. But I remember it being like a really short game. That's kind of dragged out a lot. Because basically there was only like 5 to 6 levels. And you just redid them as each like hero team. But they didn't really do anything different in the levels from what I remember. Like it's a really... It's a game with not a lot of content that is stretched out a lot. Because of like, oh, each character team has a different story. And this is definitely like the height of just like, hey, too many Sonic friends. Like, fuck off with the Sonic friends. Because this game has fucking... introduces like so many. You know, like characters who were like tiny bit characters or side characters, like being fully playable, and then even introducing like a whole other team. Fucking like the bee, the crocodile, and the chameleon. I don't even know why they were introduced. Maybe they were in Sonic Adventure 2, but I don't think they were. Yeah, so here's the Sonic Riders games. which always just seemed like the funniest thing. Like, in much of the same way how Shadow the Hedgehog is just sounds funny on paper. The Sonic Riders games are basically racing games. They're kind of like playing Wipeout or F-Zero. It's kind of on that thing. But you never know. Again, I believe these were on the original tier list that we edited. That had a lot of questionable games. Of like, hey, this is supposed to be a list of the greatest games of all time. Why are these games on it? Like, because there's a lot of games on here that were in the original list that I'm going to say, like, are going to end up in these categories that did not need to be on the list kind of thing. Alright, and Sonic Unleashed. Now, the PS2 version, I hear, is a bit different from the main console version. That was deeply flawed, where the Sonic levels were great, but the werewolf levels were tedious and just the opposite of what players wanted to do. Like, it's not a great, you know, like, hack and slash beat 'em up on its own. And people did not come to a Sonic game to do, like, a weird, like, watered down, like, God of War style combat thing. And then it also tries to do, like, the Sonic Adventure, like, adventure mode map stuff with puzzles. But from what I've seen, it's done really poorly. The PS2 version, though, actually has none of that. So from what I hear, this is, like, considered by some to actually be the better game overall. So I do want to give it a try. Yes, Legacy Kane, Soul Reaver. I think I already put one of the Legacy of Kane games on here. Again, I might have played PS1 demos, but missed out on this series. I really want to go back and check it out. Aha! Spider-Man. Okay. So Spider-Man 1, I think I played a demo of. I've not played the full game. This is based on the first movie, but it's interestingly built off of the Neversoft game, Spider-Man on PlayStation 1. Like, it has some of the same animations and combat engine. It's really weird. But I really like that Spider-Man PS1 game, so I want to check it out. Now, Spider-Man 2, I actually did have as a kid, and I played the shit out of it. And I think I'm going to put it in good. I think if you had asked me, like, 2004, 2005, I would have put it here. But, you know, standards have changed. And it's a really grindy game with, like, having to unlock story progress by doing the random encounters and things like that. It has some great ideas, like, it's kind of like physicsy juggle combat system. Like, it's got some Devil May Cry influence for sure. And again, interestingly, still has some combat moves taken from the Neversoft Spider-Man game that would have come out, like, 4 or 5 years before this. And obviously, you know, like, this was the first attempt at the you know, like, the real time physics-based swinging system. Like, and that's still fun to play. The only problem with it probably playing it now is it takes quite a long time to unlock stuff in the game. Like, obviously it was new, so they kind of piecemeal it not to overwhelm the player. But it's not that hard to get into, so it's definitely done in a bit too of a tedious way. But this was also an era where superhero licensed games were so bad. Especially on PlayStation 2. Like, Spider-Man on PlayStation 1, already did okay. But then this was a movie-based one as well. But it actually came out, like, really good. Did some really fun, like, extra story stuff of bringing in characters who weren't in the movie. Like, Mysterio shows up and Black Cat. And you do get Tobey Maguire, though he's so bad. They got him for all of these, like, licensed movie games, but he was always so bad at doing, like, dub booth recording compared to him in the movies. Poor guy. But it was always fun getting him. And then Spider-Man 3 is another one I would have to try at some point. And then I believe this is Spider-Man Friend or Foe, which was like when the Spider-Man games were continuing on next gen, which I think Spider-Man 3 was mostly a next gen game. This is like a side-scrolling beat-em-up game mostly that I hear is like quite cool and worth checking out. Ah, yeah, here we go. Splinter Cell. Splinter Cell. Now, I've not played all these Splinter Cell games, but I'm going to say, based on what I've played and just general knowledge, all the Splinter Cell games are going to go here. These were games specifically built for the Xbox hardware. That was kind of like the main platform. Like, though the PC versions would get little enhancements, the PS2 versions were not the main platforms. And from what I understand, these are quite rough to play on PlayStation 2. So if you're going to play them anywhere, play them on original Xbox. Also, I think most of them are actually playable on Xbox One backwards compatibility as well. But I feel confident saying this. Like, the PS2 versions of these are ones that are like, hey, they run. They're kind of in the same territory as, like, Max Payne, Mercenaries, Just Cause, which runs very scuffed on PlayStation 2. I've been playing some of it, actually, to get an idea of it. And it looks like a PC game running at, like, lowest settings possible kind of thing. Hang on. I needed that. And then what was next? Oh yeah, Spy Fiction. One of Sweary 65's like early games. I definitely want to try this out. From what I understand, this is a Metal Gear Solid clone. It might not be very good, but I definitely want to try it out just because of developers involved. Now, Spy Hunter here, I'm going to include all of the Spy Hunter games here. Midway in the PlayStation 2 era was very interesting because kind of how you had like Capcom and Sega and Namco, who in the 90s were primarily arcade developers. In the 2000s, they had to mostly switch over to being console developers. And Midway was one of the Western examples of that, because they were like a huge 80s and 90s arcade studio. But then obviously the arcades became a less viable main business model because the home consoles kind of caught up. And making these like uber powerful, like multiple generations ahead arcade machines, like it just wasn't where the money was anymore. And I hear the Spy Hunter PS2 games are like very different from the source material. This also includes the one with Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. That was originally supposed to be a movie, but then something happened where the movie didn't come out, but the game that the movie was based on still came out. And I watched a review about it, actually, from a channel called Minim Me. It's like Mini-Me, but with an N between the mini and the me. And apparently, like, it's a really fun romp. So I actually want to go back and try all the Spy Hunter games, where they're both like a mixture of these kind of like set PC car combat racing segments and like third-person shooter stuff. Oh yeah, Star Ocean till the end of time. I always hear there was a lot of previews for this game in the PlayStation 2 magazine I used to get. And I always wanted this, but obviously when you were that age, you didn't have a lot of money. You couldn't just get every game you wanted. From what I remember, this is one of the few like PlayStation 2 games that actually has multiple discs. You were so used to it in the Final Fantasy era on PlayStation 1, because every mainline new Final Fantasy game was multi-disc. 7, 8, and 9 were 3-disc and then 4-disc, 4-disc. But then for PlayStation 2, moving over to DVD, Obviously, we didn't get as many games, but Final Fantasy X was one DVD, and Final Fantasy 12 was one DVD as well. Though you can tell if you play that PS2 version how much some of the audio is compressed to make that game fit on one disc, and I think it was because of like the way that game was played and made that they couldn't have like realistically used multiple discs, because like the most of the disc space would have just been voice clips, and you would have mostly have just been reusing the same assets on both discs, kind of thing. But I hear this is like probably one of the last great Star Ocean games. My only real exposure to the later Star Ocean games is that fucking infamous cutscene. It's like, I think it's known as like one of the worst voice acted video game cutscenes, where it's the fucking Neji, I want sleepy time, I want nappy time Neji cutscene. And that's like one of the 360 ones. But I hear they're kind of dropped in quality since then. I know I think it was like the first or the second Star Ocean game recently got a remake that people seem to really love. But I do want to go and try this game one day. Just because I always heard it was a really grand game. Though, again, I hear it's like really long. Like even compared to like base Final Fantasy, like PlayStation 1 Final Fantasies, it's like double the length of those. And that's like not including optional content and stuff like that. Oh yeah, the Battlefront games. I actually did play these a bit back in the day, though I never had my own copies. I think I'm going to say on these are going to be play elsewhere games, because I remember them not running very well on PS2, but also, like, the main draw with them is playing them online. And I don't know about the first one, but you can actually play this one, Star Wars Battlefront 2, you can play it online, and actually restored the servers for it, which was cool, on PC. So for that reason alone, I'm going to say play elsewhere. Oh yeah, okay. This one I don't know much about. Here's the thing, like, I used to be more into Star Wars as a kid. Though even as a kid, I was like, man, Episode 1's like not a good movie. Even as a kid, I could tell that was not that well made, even if I thought it had some cool elements. And I straight up, here's the thing, I kind of fell out of it pretty quick, because I've never seen Episode 2, I've never seen Episode 3, I'm not seeing any of the Disney shit, and I'm fucking thankful for it, because I don't want to be part of any of that discourse. Thank you very much. So I'm not like that kind of nostalgic for Star Wars games or games in the series. Star Wars Episode 3, this game's actually pretty legit, and I need to play more of it. Me and my nephew have played some of it. It's definitely not stylish action, but it's a pretty decent hack and slash, and it's actually got like a pretty good fighting game versus mode, and the reason why is because a lot of the devs that worked on this actually had made fighting games before this. Star Wars Jedi Starfighter, though, I don't know if I would play that one, but maybe. Oh, and here we go. So I have played the main version of Star Wars The Force Unleashed. My opinion on Star Wars The Force Unleashed 1 is that it is a great game, despite its flaws, that I wish had gotten the time to grow that it deserved. Like, obviously, a lot of the game was put into, like, the world building and the production, as opposed to kind of making the gameplay a bit tighter. And you could feel with the first game that they were trying to lean more into Devil May Cry than God of War. And it wasn't quite as tight as it needed to be, but just obviously, like, the physics engine stuff's fun, the force powers, the general combat. However, the one-on-one Jedi fights in the first game are pretty rough. It always, when I played it, it felt kind of like luck. There wasn't really that same kind of solid tells that Devil May Cry has with the kind of like one-on-one Virgil fights. You know, where like you're fighting someone of kind of like equal strength and power. But the PS2 version is quite different. Like, it obviously doesn't have the same physics simulation. It's got some physics, but not the same stuff. But the combat, the level design, a lot of it's actually quite different. But this is the version that I believe the PSP and the Wii version are based on. And weirdly enough, that fucking Switch remaster is based on this version. It's based on the Wii version, not the 360 PS3 version. But I've played only a tiny bit, but I want to actually give this game a full try, just to kind of see, like, what is different about this version. Ah, yes, Starsky and Hutch. I put this on here. Why did I put this on here? I love, light gun games, and this actually is playable with a light gun. It's weird because it came out around the time of the movie, but I don't believe it's based on the movie at all. But you know, this feels like a tribute to kind of the Driver games, but you know, you're able to drive and shoot at the same time. And funny enough, I don't know why, but one of the newspapers that someone in my family used to get like 20 years ago randomly came with like a shareware PC demo for this game that had like a third of the levels on it. It actually had like a pretty big chunk of the game. It wasn't like a typical demo where you only got like 1 or 2 levels. It was like a couple of hours of content. But from what I understand, you can play this with a steering wheel and the GunCon 2. And I want to do that. It's the dumbest thing ever, but I really want to try it out. Oh yeah, the State of Emergency games. Funny enough, it's weird because these were seen as like slight competition to Grand Theft Auto 3, even though they ended up being published by Rockstar. They're not Rockstar developed the first one. But I've never actually played them. Though I hear the second one is quite bad, but I want to give them both a try. Oh yeah, this one. I looked this one up. This was on the original tier list. And it does seem kind of cool. I believe it's like a steampunk JRPG. Okay, Stuntman. I don't have too much to say on this, but I do want to give it an honest try. So Stuntman, I didn't own back in the day, but one of my friends at the time did. There's a lot of games that I never owned on PlayStation 2, but I mostly played at his house. And he had Stuntman. And I remember it seeming like the coolest thing, you know, of like, hey, you're actually trying to make movie scenes and you've got all these like stunt markers and like, oh, you know, directions and follow these things. Now, I've played the second game, which was actually made by a different dev team, not made by the Driver devs. This one I've not played all the way through, and obviously not played it properly for decades, so I need to give it a more honest try. From what I remember though, the second game is a bit more lenient. Like, it's a bit more forgiving where you don't have to perfectly hit all the markers, whereas Stuntman is quite harsh where it's like, no, you have to hit all your markers. And has like really tight time restrictions. Now, I also remember it having a really fun like track editor where you could make your own stunt arrangements and things like that, and also the kind of patented like Driver like cinematic action camera stuff. The Suikoden games, I'm gonna say might plays. I need to do a bit more research on them to see about them, but I don't know enough to say. Super Buster Move, I've never actually played. So, I played a decent amount of PlayStation 1 Buster Move. Specifically, Buster Move 4 though I don't currently have a copy, but that's my favorite. Just having like a really good battle mode and having so many characters with unique animations. However, I've never played the first PS2 one. I know there's actually a second one as well. Which it doesn't help that this fucking box art is so bad. I don't know what the fucking... who this box art's for. Like, what the thing? Like, yo, we need to get babies interested in this game, but we need babies to think that babies are cool. But also, this is going to make older people think the babies are cool. I don't know. It's a fucking abysmal box art. And I think that alone, like, puts people off. But I do want to try this properly, just because of how much I like Buster Move 4. Oh yeah, Siphon Filter. So I think one of the Siphon Filter games is missing here. There's the Omega Strain, there's Dark Mirror, there's also a Logan something. But I've missed out on all the Siphon Filter games. I only ever had demos. But I want to give these a try. And they're going to be put on that, like, will thing. Oh yeah, Tuck in the Power of Juju. I don't know. Again, this was on the original tier list. I believe it's like a collectathon character platformer, 3D style. So, you know, similar to the Jack games, Ratchet, that kind of style. I don't know if it's actually any good though. So maybe I'll play it. Maybe I won't. I just don't really know. Tales of the Abyss again. Actually, no. Is this yeah, I think these are both Tales of the Abyss. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit more. Let me look at them. Yeah, I think these are both... yeah, because they're both Namco. Again, for some people, they're probably like all-time classics. I've just never played them. Okay, I need a drink here because I've got a lot to talk about here now. Here we go. Tekken. Tekken is my favorite fighting game series of all time. Don't judge me, I've not played Tekken 8 because I don't have money to buy a new game. I also don't have a PlayStation 5 and I don't know if it would even run well on my PC. But I've been into Tekken even since Tekken 2. Tekken 2 I mostly watched my sisters play, but Tekken 3 was definitely the one I got into. And growing up, I was way more of a 3D fighting fan, to the point where I couldn't even get my head around how 2D fighters played. I didn't understand how motions worked or cancel combos and things like that. It didn't click for me. I was like, why can't I just dial in combos? Why isn't there like this movement and all this kind of stuff? Tekken was always the one that was for me. I love the universe, I love the story, the characters, the mechanics. And oh god, I just realized fucking Time Crisis 3 is also a duplicate on this list. Okay. So, Tekken Tag Tournament is our first one we're going to judge. It's a Tekken Tag Tournament 1 is quite an interesting one to think about, because it was made very quickly. The original arcade version came out a year after Tekken 3 and was still running off of like PS1 based hardware. The PS2 version came out a year after that, though it is quite a significant visual upgrade. It looks like way better. I think they actually used the models they had made for the pre-rendered cutscenes for Tekken 3 were the basis for the models in the PS2 version of Tag. I'm gonna say great, as the Tekken announcer would say. Now, some people might not agree because it is kind of like a Tekken 3.5 package. Because it's, you know, built on the same system, most of the same mechanics. The UI is very similar. The stages are kind of just like PS2 upgrades of Tekken 3 locales. However, it is both... That's a great groundwork for it. Like, Tekken 3, I would say, is a masterpiece. Building on Tekken 3, this is a great starting point to kind of build on. And this is such... especially for a launch title as well for the PlayStation 2. It is probably the best looking launch title on the system. Runs at 60 frames per second. Has amazing visuals. Has a huge roster. It has every Tekken character up to this point, minus Gon, which, you know, pour one out for that little fucking dinosaur guy. But this was also such an important game. Like, obviously there's the tag system, which is not super fleshed out in this game. It wasn't, like, fleshed out properly until Tag 2. It definitely feels like more of an afterthought here, where it's just like, it feels very experimental. And in fact, I don't think the arcade version had this, but the PS2 version actually did have a like a non-tag mode. Weirdly enough, which was removed from the PS3 HD version. For some reason, one player, like, the non-tag mode is just not in the game. I don't know why. Maybe they lost the source code for it. I don't know. I don't know if there's ever been an official explanation for it. But, like, the core findings there, the visuals look amazing for the time. Like, they did such a good job of kind of, like, using these way higher detail models. Like, I think the models are actually higher poly than some of the later Tekken games on PS2. You also get the you get all the Tekken 2 roster that didn't return for free. And one thing that I think is really special about it is they actually gave them more distinct movesets. In Tekken 1 and 2, going back to Tekken 1 and 2, you notice a lot of the secret characters are basically just repurposed movesets from other characters. Like, Michelle Chan's moveset was also used by, like, Roger and Alex and Wan. And then, Roger and Alex would share moves with Kin. And Lee and Lei Wulon would share moves, Lee Chao Lan and Forest Law would share moves, martial law. For Tekken Tag Tournament 2, they actually started to build entirely unique movesets for those characters. Like, Lee Chao Lan in Tekken Tag 1 does not have a one-to-one moveset with martial law. He actually has moves that he would carry on through the rest of the series that started in this game. Like, they actually started to make the characters feel more dramatically different. And Lee's like one of the prime examples of it. Wan doesn't get quite as much of the love, but like some of the kind of more duplicate characters, like the different, like Kin and Armakin has some different stuff going on. The Jacks I don't remember having much, even though there's like 3 of them in the game. But again, you get such a huge roster. Even Kazuya has stuff that he was going to have. It felt like they were experimenting with, okay, we want to bring some characters back, but we want to give them new movesets that aren't just mirrors of other characters' movesets. And Tekken Tag gave them these movesets. But you've got great core fighting still. Obviously, the endings are a bit scaled down. Obviously, it was a more rushed development, so the endings are not these pre-rendered cutscenes with original music. They're all just kind of like little like flavor fun stuff, but there are some fun ones in there. They're all done in engine, and they all have like the same song outside of if you play as the final boss, she has a pre-rendered cutscene ending with original like music. But it's a great package. You also get like, you know, time attack, survival, team battle. You don't get Tekken Force mode or Tekken Ball, but you do get Tekken Bowling. And Tekken Bowling is like shockingly like a little fun excursion to do that's come back like 2 more times after this. It is shockingly like really fun and just goofy. And it's weird how that's become like identity with the Tekken series. But you can pick up Tekken Tag 1 today, like pop it in with a few friends, and it still holds up. Like, it looks great, especially if you play that PS3 remaster. Like, just seeing the game running at like 1080p is glorious. But even playing it on PS2, it's still like one of the best looking games on the system, which is again crazy for a game that came out on launch, at least North America launch, like maybe not Japan launch, but again came out in 2000. But it isn't like a full sequel, so that does hold it back. Like it feels like, you know, like if you in the Street Fighter sense, it feels like going from Street Fighter 2 to Super Street Fighter 2, or going through the alpha games. Like it's that kind of revision, which, you know, later Tekken games would get, because like Tekken 6 had Tekken 6, and then there was Tekken 6 Bloodlines, and Tekken 7 had a couple of like title updates. It feels like that. It feels like a title update to Tekken 3, but they definitely put enough in there to kind of justify it as its own thing. Also it does have like it has a couple of unique animations of like characters when they team up and stuff like that. Tekken Tag Tournament 2 would really expand on that, but even Tekken Tag 1 has like the early sightings of it. I'm kind of curious when Tekken's going to get the opportunity to kind of experiment with the tag stuff again. We'll see. Alright, Tekken 4, the black sheep of the family. Tekken 4 is a weird game. So, I guess after Tekken 1 was kind of like its own thing, but was mostly going after Virtua Fighter, and Tekken 2 kind of built on that, and then Tekken 3 is really where it came onto its own. But Tekken had always been making these kind of incremental changes while being mostly the same game. And like, yeah, Tekken 3 was probably the biggest step up, because it gave like side steps and got rid of like the moon jumps and kind of stuck more to like where it was taking its own fine engine. And then obviously Tekken Tag was mostly a minor upgrade. Tekken 4 is where they really tried to shake up the formula, and unfortunately most of it does not land very well. That being said, the PlayStation 2 game is a great package. Now, what do I mean by a lot of what it does doesn't land? So, Tekken 4 tries a lot of stuff that does not feel refined. The gameplay is like actually slowed down a bit from where Tekken Tag was. It feels like Tekken Tag is a little faster than Tekken 3. Tekken 4 actually feels like it goes back a bit. Instead of having the stages that went on like infinitely, the game instead has actual physical arenas. So this was where they were first messing with wall combos. The problem is that the arenas are huge. They're technically impressive, but the arenas are like, here's an entire airport runway. Here's an entire indoor shopping mall. Here's the entire roof of a building. Like, some of these stages, like, if you were doing, like, forward back dashes with the character, would take you, like, a minute or two to get from, like, one end to the other. It's ridiculous. To the point that when you go to the stage select, they give you multiple starting points. And then you also have to deal with uneven surfaces. If you're familiar with Virtua Fighter 3 or the Dead or Alive series, it's close to that though. Dead or Alive always did some kind of like automation where if one character was on a higher and a lower surface, the characters would kind of fight like this. So highs would still hit high and lows would still hit low. Tekken 4 does not really do that. So if you're on like the high ground, you could do a move and it would just whiff past the head. And a lot of like the weird collision with the kind of trying to make real places. And that's weird. Also, you can move before the round starts. It's a very weird addition. And the throw, like, instead of having two separate throw buttons, there's a... It's done by direction, so there's like your grab moves that are done by doing different directions. And then there's like a position jockeying throw that is just used for moving your opponent around the arena. If you want to like move them to the sides or further away and push them into a wall or push them behind you, like stuff like that. It's weird because it feels like they were trying to go back to Virtua Fighter, like more so than go in their own direction. Though obviously I think there's a bit of Dead or Alive inspiration as well, especially with like wall hits and stuff, because Dead or Alive have been doing that since like Dead or Alive 2. And also the tone is very different. Like Tekken always had kind of like a fantastical tone. It was never like super grounded. A lot of the endings in Tekken 1 and 2 were like unintentionally hilarious. Tekken 3 is where they kind of started to kind of try and play them serious. But, you know, like most of the story was just in the endings and the characters were kind of just their own personalities. Tekken 4 has this very like grounded, dark, seedy undertone. Like everyone's down on their luck. You don't have this like intense battle music anymore. It's all kind of like chill atmosphere building stuff. A lot of the characters, and it feels like this was partly to show off tech, that they were really impressed with how they could do hair physics at the time. So a lot of the characters have like grown their hair out or let their hair down. Like Paul Phoenix is down on his luck. Martial Law's lost his restaurant. Even the new characters like Crane Marduk is like accused of killing a guy in a bar fight, and and that was like Armakin, so Kin's like grown his hair out, so he's got like a massive fucking hair coming out the back of his mask. It's so weird. But yeah, so like the core fighting is definitely a step back from Tekken 3 and Tekken Tag. It is still Tekken though, and it's also the groundwork for where Tekken would go, because Tekken would keep arenas with walls. Funny enough, they would just finely tune it more. And it's a little bit of a smaller roster than Tekken 3 as well. Like there's a lot of like mainstays that were just missing in Tekken 4. People that come to mind specifically, like Eddie Gordo being replaced with Christy, already felt like weird. Of just like, hey, it just felt like you wanted to add a sexy lady instead of Eddie for some reason. Like Eddie's not sexy. He's sexy, come on, Namco. But who was it? There was someone I was thinking of. Like Anna Williams being missing felt very weird, because she was so integral to Nina's story, and then she was just gone. She just like wasn't there. But it mainly, you know, for bringing that like Tekken 4 Tekken Tag Tournament brought back so many classic characters. And then like 4 kind of like went back on it, where it was mostly just the new Tekken 3 characters and Lee, Xiaolan, and Kazuya from Tekken 2. Like it's still a pretty big roster, but it definitely was like, well, we just did Tag, and Tag was like 32, 35. It was like a step down from that, and it is slightly smaller than Tekken 3. Though it is most of the Tekken 3 roster you would care about. And Eddie is still unlockable. He's just like not a story thing. But having said all that, it is a great soundtrack. It's very different than where Tekken had been previously, but it weirdly fits the tone of it, what it's going for. And as a package on PlayStation 2, each character, first off, the opening movie is great. Like, despite what else with that game, the opening CGI cutscene is so good. You know, bringing with the return of Kazuya. But every character gets, like, a full story mode where you know, at the start, they get full voice-acted prologues with text explaining their story and their situation. We don't get mid-arcade mode story yet, but you do sometimes, like, get a couple of those, like, text screens with the dialogue before the ending. And, like, seeing them, like, this, for me, was the first time seeing a fighting game, like, actually really expand its story outside of just arcade mode endings. Like, no, we're actually explaining things. And there are intersecting endings where you have to play, like, multiple characters to piece together events and things like that. It's really cool. But, and then also, you know, you still get, like, survival and team battle and time attack and all that. And then the Tekken Force mode in 4 might actually be the best one. It's actually the one that probably works the best. Tekken 3's is a little clunky because it's kind of got like a hybrid tank control thing, because you can only move towards people you're locked onto, really. It's a bit weird. It doesn't quite work. But because on PlayStation 2, they're able to, like, do fully 3D rendered areas, the Tekken Tag mode in 4 is actually really fun. Like, there's a lot of variety to the stages you go through. They're not just straight paths. There's a lot of different enemy variety. And they do a really good job of, like, giving the different Tekken Force or G Corporation members different movesets built from other enemy parts and the pickups. It's still quite hard, but it's actually doable and you're actually able to continue. But it's probably the best attempt in the series at kind of making a beat 'em up in the Tekken engine. From there on, they would kind of mess with it a bit, and I don't think it ever landed as well. But it's such a good package. Like, even if the core fighting is a bit weirder, it's also just, like, interesting in its weirdness. Of just, like, weird wall combos you can get away with. There's one stage where a couple of characters are able to hit characters off the ceiling, which has never come back. And as far as I can tell, only Kuma/Panda can do it. And they can only do it to certain characters. No one else is able to launch characters that's high enough to do it. But it's just fascinating to me that it was trying all this stuff. It's also like the first time they'd messed with the idea of characters speak in their own native tongue. No, they only really did it with English and Japanese. It really got expanded later in the series. But despite its problems in its core fighting, I think the whole package with all the story and the cutscenes, and again, like, visually, it looks great. Like, I think maybe the character models in Tag 1 might look slightly better. But the art direction's still amazing. It's still a really good-looking game to this day. Also, like, has an actual, like, progressive output mode as well. But Tekken 5, though. Has to be a masterpiece. I don't... Outside of just, you can't get into Tekken, you can't get into 3D fighters. Tekken 5, like, you think of how much they kind of dropped the ball with Tekken 4. Tekken 4 was very experimental. A lot of the systems it was trying did not feel like they had been refined. Hey, we're just gonna put, like, walls or like weird objects you can knock people into, and we're not really going to see if it works well or not. We're just going to kind of make it and just see what happens. Tekken 5 is such a comeback. Like, both in how it kind of like, okay, it's harkening back more to how Tekken 3 felt. We've now got infinite scrolling stages, but we also have enclosed stages that have more simple structures and the wall combos actually make sense. You've got a super expansive roster where now most of the Tekken 2 and Tekken 3 characters have all returned. You've still got the you've still got the prologue you've got the prologue narration and ending narration with their, pre-rendered cutscene endings. You also get, in some cases, multiple in-game mid-arcade mode encounters, where story mode encounters, like halfway through they'll meet like a rival, near the end they'll talk to like a pre-boss fight, or they'll have unique dialogue with the boss. It brought back some of the more fantasy elements, like Roger returned as Roger Jr. Jack came back. The final boss, Jinpachi, is such a cool design. Though I really wish they had not retconned him to not be Devil Gened. Though it was also, the start of having like final bosses that were a little cheap. But like it just really expanded on like how the juggle system worked and the movesets. Having this huge roster, also the new characters, just really cool, really expansive story. Then also you have all the character customization they added, where you can recolor pieces and there's unique items you can equip to each one. You've got the kind of like arcade simulation mode where you can rank up your character. It's like a precursor to where online modes would go, but it's like simulated offline, and you can like pick the ranks to fight against and earn money to use in the other modes. You also, God, there is so much in the Tekken 5 package. Again, you get the survival, the team battle, time attacks, and then you get emulated versions of the arcade releases of Tekken 1, 2, and 3, which is crazy. It reminds me of that Namco put out a Japan-only collection that had Point Blank 1, 2, 3 and Time Crisis in them for PlayStation 2. But it's not the arcade versions, it's the PS1 versions. And they didn't like up-res them or improve the frame rate or anything. But this took the arcade originals that, though they were on similar to PS1 hardware, the arcade hardware had a bit more VRAM. So they do look better in the arcade. But getting those full arcade versions at home emulated pretty well. I'm not aware of major issues with the emulation there. Also, the startup, I forget what the name of it. It's like Saberblade or something. It's like a really early 3D flight sim rail shooter game. There's also the Devil Within mode. Now, I know some people aren't that much fans of it. I want to give it a more honest try because I've messed with it. It has issues. So, Devil Within was an attempt. Hang on. Okay, Lola. Oh. There. I don't know why you're doing that, Lola. You're going. Oh, well, I guess she's okay. She's looking at me funny, like, why are you making that noise? It's the noise you were making. Okay? So, around this time, Namco were doing a lot of kind of experimentation with making, 3D beat-em-ups outside of, just using the Tekken combat. For example, Death by Degrees, which is kind of Rise to Honor, but including not survival horror gameplay, but the adventure mode, the adventure game stuff of collecting key items and bringing them back and solving puzzles. But the main combat in that plays like Rise to Honor, where you're using like the right stick to do moves. And they also did Urban Reign, which, funny enough, I think Urban Reign probably controls closer to the Devil Within mode than it does Tekken. Like, Urban Reign is like Namco's take on the Def Jam games almost, but it's mostly a 3D beat-em-up, but it does have like a versus mode. The Devil Within mode has some interesting stuff going on, because they actually translated Jin's moveset to a like 3D beat-em-up hack and slash moveset where he has like a light and a heavy and a jump button. And by doing different directional inputs, you do different combos, and there's all juggle systems. The problem is that the levels themselves are really basic. They feel like they were made in like a really early era, like level, like console level maker, where you could just put down like, here's a square room, you can put crates in the room. Like, if you've ever used the Time Splitters level editor, it feels like that level of complexity. And I can't remember it all the way through, but like a lot of it also takes place in these like weird training labs. But I think it's more interesting than people give it credit for, because I don't think people really experiment with the combat to, like, granted, I don't think the game might give you reason for it, but you know, there is a lot of move variety, and there is like a slightest action system where you earn more money for doing longer combos and not getting hit and things like that, though it just gives you money to use in the main game, not like a separate progression in the Devil Within mode. It definitely feels like if Devil Within had maybe instead been a separate release that had like fully developed levels and more developed enemies, that probably would have been a good game. But it's still, I think it's a bit more fun than the scenario mode in Tekken 6, which plays more like, it's like, feels like it was trying to do the Tekken Force mode, but then with a free cam, and you have to like do moves, you have to do them like Devil May Cry direction based, but then suddenly, but using the side camera Tekken controls. It was very odd. And it's also like the only way to like really earn decent amounts of money in Tekken 6. And that's how you like unlock all the character endings and stuff. It's a bit weird. But it's still like an interesting experiment in Tekken 5. And then just Tekken 5 like looks amazing. Like, it's definitely not as high poly, but the art direction and the texture work and the stages look so cool. It's such an energetic and intense soundtrack. Some of the best songs in the series, like Moonlight Wilderness, the Dragon stage I forget the name of, Ground Zero Funk. It is just, it felt like such an event of just like, hey, this feels like the massive step that Tekken 3 was again. Like, how rare is it for like a fighting game to get like that many big step ups, you know, of like changes to things. But yeah, Tekken 5 still great to play. Obviously there's like multiple versions of the Dark Resurrection upgrade to play, but you can load up the PS2 version and have just as much fun. And again, there's so much to do on your own, like all the different character endings, such an expansive roster. Like, after like the major upgrade from like Tekken Tag 2 to 7, we've you know, to get to that roster, Tekken 7 had to have like multiple series of DLC. But this game just launched with like a roster that was like slightly bigger than Tekken Tag, and didn't have characters with duplicate movesets and stuff. It's crazy. But a must play. Even if you don't like fighting games, I think you should give Tekken 5 a try. Because you might just get a lot out of it. Anyway. Alright, the Tenchu games. So, I used to play demos of Tenchu on PlayStation 1. And though they weren't horror games, I always found them kind of scary. But I've never actually played these PS2 ones. Funny enough, because I've been playing Sekiro, I feel like Sekiro might be kind of like a spiritual successor to these games, but with a bit more combat focus. I remember these being like stealth ninja simulators on PS1, but I've never even seen the PS2 versions. I do want to check them out though. Ah, yes, the Terminator games. So, this one I've not played, but these are all very different games that I want to check out. Now, this one I hear is not a very good game, but I want to play it because it looks really dumb. This is the one that's based on, obviously, Terminator 3. Not a very good movie. But the main thing I remember about this is it had one-on-one fighting game scenes where you would play as, like, the T-800 fighting, like, the female Terminator. And they were trying to kind of emulate the whole, like, smashing through walls and breaking up the environment stuff. This one, Terminator 3 Redemption, completely different game. It's actually set in the future. And I've seen someone play it, and it actually looks pretty decent, but it's a very hard game. It seems to have no checkpointing at all. But I want to give these all a try, just because it's an interesting collection of licensed games, both trying to emulate the movie and do their own things as well. Alright, Simpson games. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go these in order. Simpsons Road Rage, I've never actually played. Obviously, probably infamous for being a Crazy Taxi clone. Such an on-the-nose Crazy Taxi clone that Sega actually took them to a court for patent infringement and won. Because Sega had patented some of the Crazy Taxi systems. And, when you patent something, I think you get the rights to them for like 5 to 10 years or something. Not a fan of patent stuff in video game mechanics. Kind of just holds the industry back. Like, great, no one else can use this system and build upon it. Like, fuck you, I guess. Fuck me. Fuck everyone. Simpsons Hit and Run, though, I have played. Oh, the GBA version of Road Rage, yeah. It's like Crazy Mode 7 with, like, hills and jumps. Oh, hang on. But, yeah, Hit and Run, it's interesting because Hit and Run is, like, built on that same engine, but them trying to expand it out into, like, a more, open GTA-style thing. It is shocking, like, how well it worked. Obviously, a very big fan service-y game. Like, this game is just, like, chock full of references, more so than even Simpsons Road Rage. I'll say for the PAL version, this might be a PAL-only version. Like, the frame rate gets really rough on the PAL version. And some of the final level, like, timer requirements are really rough. You would probably want to play either the Xbox OG version or the PC version, or I think it's done now. There's a fan remake where someone like actually remade the cutscenes to look like animated Simpsons. I don't know if that's done yet or not. But this is still a really fun kind of goofy arcade take on like the kind of GTA formula. Really fun. Radical Entertainment at the time, who made this. They made this. They made Hulk Ultimate Destruction. And the Scarface game. They were like doing really cool stuff at the time. And then Activision brought Vivendi and then killed like all the games they had in development. They made Prototype and then they like fired most of the studio. It's really sad. But Simpsons Hit and Run actually was supposed to come out, and there is footage of a in development build where they actually, fit like one of the things with Simpsons Hit and Run is that it's not one big expansive map like the Grand Theft Auto games. They were kind of levels that were like just circuits. They felt like Crazy Taxi levels with like early Grand Theft Auto 3 or like Midtown Madness kind of optional objectives in them. Funny enough, like Simpsons Hit and Run is probably closer to where Crazy Taxi should have gone, instead of just kind of Crazy Taxi 3 just being like a best of game. But there is footage out there of their early work of what Simpsons Hit and Run 2 was supposed to be, where they had upgraded the engine so it was going to have like a full city map. But yeah, Activision fucking killed it. After buying Vivendi, they had like no interest in doing any of their licensed games, so they shut all of them down. But obviously, if you don't know anything about The Simpsons, there's probably not a lot you would get out of Simpsons Hit and Run. But I think if you have like any cursory interest, and obviously Simpsons has been going on for a long time, and even at the point that this had come out, Simpsons had already gone past its peak era. But if you've watched like any of its kind of like 90s peak era, I think you would get a lot out of Simpsons Hit and Run. And it's crazy where people are taking modding for that game. Now, the movie game I've not played. I believe, yeah, EA made this instead. I want to check this out, but I hear it's kind of a letdown compared to the Radical Entertainment games. And also, it might be a thing where the better version to play is the 360 PS3 version. I don't know how different the PS2 version is. Ah, yeah, The Sims. The Sims. Okay. I actually did want to include these on the list as games I want to play. No, funny enough, Sims 2 I actually have played. Sims 2 on console is quite interesting because it actually has a single-player story mode. Where instead of just kind of, oh, you make your sim and you just pick your own objectives, it's got like a self-contained narrative where you're like, you start out as a flatmate, and I remember this, you have like a really annoying flatmate who has like quirks where he won't tidy up after himself and he doesn't work, and you kind of have to complete objectives and goals and you move up. And from what I understand, these are not in the engines that the PC versions were. Like, the PC ones had that kind of like pre-rendered background with 3D models on top. These I remember being like fully 3D games. I want to give all these games a more of a proper try though, just because they're really fascinating versions. Having like single player content. Also, yes, apparently online. As you can see, it's got the network strip. I'm guessing like all of them apart from the first game had them. This one also has iToy compatibility, which I did not remember. I'm really curious what it does. But I actually do want to give these a try, because these are very different games than the PC ones. Like, they still have the mode that is closer to just, hey, build your house, just control Sims, and there's no real goal. You just kind of do your own thing. But these are very different versions. And I remember Sims 2 being quite cool because of it. Oh yeah, the suffering. The suffering. I'll probably play this at some point. It is a weird, like, it's kind of a survival horror game, but not really. It's probably like most known. Oh, I forget his name. Midway got like a really renowned like movie creature designer to do the monster design in this. It feels like, it's funny. This feels like it's funny. And ironically, here's why. This feels like what Western developers thought Silent Hill was, which is funny because this game feels like those later Western developed Silent Hill games. In fact, one of the producers of Silent Hill Homecoming was one of the lead devs on this. Sorry, Downpour, the prison game, also worked on this prison survival horror game. Though this game has like, it's, I'd say way better. But I want to give this one a try. I hear the sequel, Ties That Binds, is really bad though. But we might check this out. I might put this into the might play, actually. I'm not so sure if I would play it. I would maybe, like, try it out, but I don't know if I would play it all the way through. Same with the Fin. And I think this one was on the original tier list I recreated. Very weird game. Squad-based, like, tactical shooter with a lot of kind of, like, random emergent elements. The main thing I remember from it is, like, the whole gimmick is, like, yes, your squad mates can randomly become the Fin. And there's a lot of, like, dynamic emergent Fins, and you pick people up, and it's a sequel to the movie that, like, explains what happened after the end of that movie. But I don't know if it's actually any good. It feels like a game that's possibly liked for what it's trying to do more than its actual attempt. Alright. Ah, yes, The Warriors. The Warriors is definitely plan to play. This is a Rockstar game I missed out on. Now, straight up, I have never seen the movie. I have never seen The Warriors. What have I seen? I've seen the guy with the bottles on his fingers doing this, saying, Warriors, come out and play. And that's it. That's the only thing I know about The Warriors. But it's just fascinating because Rockstar, their games, or like most of their games were always like movie homages or TV homages. And The Warriors is just straight up based on a movie. And it's very different from their other games. It's mostly a beat 'em up from what I understand. I've got to check it out though at some point. I just need to find like a good opportunity for it. Okay, Theme Park World. Theme Park World. So, this one is a weird judgment call on my part. Because I mostly played the PS1 version. I actually did not know that it got an enhanced PS2 version. Okay, you know what? So I've not played this version. I've played the PS1 version. The PS1 version I loved. So Theme Park is from the people who made like Theme Hospital and that series. And the original Theme Park was like a PC game, but Theme Park World was like more built to work on consoles, and it was originally a PS1 focused game, but it got like a slightly enhanced PS2 version. You know, like early into the PS2 generation. But I loved it. Like, obviously there's Roller Coaster Tycoon and stuff like that, and it's a bit different from that. I think it's a bit more casual, but it was like fully 3D. It had like a full-on like coaster builder, and you could walk around your park and try out all the rides and stuff like that. I've not played this PS2 version, but I think I would play it just because I have so much nostalgia for that PS1 game, especially the music. Like, I can already hear the main theme in my head. It's so good. Alright. Tiger Woods. So, this is kind of including all the games, because there are so many. This is weird, because, like, obviously a lot of the EA Sports games were very derivative. Not much was going with them. Unless you're really into sports, they didn't mean much. From what I understand from like demos and stuff I read from press and talking to people, Tiger Woods games seem to be liked by people who aren't even into golf. Like, they're just really good on their own. I remember having a lot of fun with the demos. One of the demos actually had the full character creator, which was really advanced for the time. Like, you could re-sculpt the heads pretty detailed to make it look like real people. One of the things I remember specifically is one of the games has the Happy Gilmore, like, run up to do a drive, like, run, swing. If you, like, max out the power meter, they're kind of, like, somewhat self-aware that they're video games and has some, like, goofiness to them. And I think you can even do a bit of, like, if you're about to get a hole in one, they actually let you, like, control the ball a bit. But I want to give these all, like, an honest try. But I've not, like, played one of them all the way through. There's probably like one specific one that's like, oh, this is the one to play. I'd have to do some research to see like, okay, did they have like a lot of new courses in each game, or were they mostly the same? But like, I'll put it this way: in my collection, I don't have like any FIFA games, I don't have any NFL games, anything like that. But I have a couple of Tiger Woods games. Granted, some of them are from bundles, but I actually don't mind collecting some of the Tiger Woods games because I hear they hold up, and I'll like a golf game every now and again. You know, it's fun to get into golf. Ah, yes, Time Splitters. So, Time Splitters 1, I've not actually played. This was also... I can't remember if it was launched, but it was really early. And you can tell it is mostly a multiplayer suite with kind of like user-created single-player levels that are basically just kind of like slightly repurposed multiplayer levels. However, Time Splitters 2. Okay. This might be a hot take for some people. I'm not sure. I think Time Splitters 2 is a masterpiece. It's kind of funny to me that like Halo took over as like in the zeitgeist, you know, like the air of video games. And obviously that did do a lot for console shooters in terms of like the sense of scale and having like really good grounded shooting controls and movement and letting you like control vehicles and things like that. But in terms of kind of carrying on the spirit of GoldenEye in a way that still holds up, Time Splitters 2 is such an awesome package. Like an actually full structured out single player mode where playing, you know, it has the GoldenEye system where when the difficulty you play on unlocks extra objectives. The levels are really expansive. The multiplayer suite is really big. The amount of memories I have of playing like 4-player split screens on various versions of this. And honestly, I think whatever platform you play it on, you're going to have a good time. The main thing is just on GameCube or Xbox. You know, you've got the 4 controller ports built into the console, whereas on PS2 you need a multi-tap. But aside from that, like the full level editor, the music, the style, the humor, it's a really good package with really cool shooting. Like, I think is like that kind of style of shooting, it's one of the best, and I still might put it as a masterpiece. A part of me is like slowly more leaning towards great, but I think as an overall package, it's still in this tier. I will say though, for me personally, Future Perfect is the better game. Because Future Perfect... So, Time Splitters 2 has a bit of a kind of like free-formy... Not free-forming, but like the levels are... The single-player levels are a bit more sandboxy in Time Splitters 2. Like, you have your objectives, but you can kind of move through them freely. You don't have, like, cutscenes mid-level or a lot of, like, dialogue going on. It's kind of supposed to be slightly emergent, though obviously there's only really, like, one way to do things. But there's a little bit of, like, freedom. And maybe people prefer that in Time Splitters 2, but Time Splitters Future Perfect has probably my favorite first-person shooter campaign on PlayStation 2 that I've played. Granted, there's some that I've missed, like I've not played all the Call of Duties all the way through, I've not played the Medal of Honors all the way through. But I think from what I've played of those, this would still be my favorite. Obviously, they were taking some cues from Halo, where they would kind of do multiple structured segments. They would have like little drive-in sequences and turret sections. But they really expand on the whole time travel storyline, like jumping to these different timelines and finding all these weapon varieties. Like, obviously Time Splitters 2 had that, but Future Perfect builds it into the story. Cortez being just the main character instead of kind of becoming characters in time, whereas those characters are now sidekicks that follow you through the levels, and they, you know, they have dialogue and there's events, stuff going on. It's a really funny game in a way that, like, holds up really well. Like, there's a little bit of movie reference stuff, but it's not that referential. It's more kind of just references the tone and the style. The core shooting holds up really well. The level editor's, like, even more expansive, to the point where you can make, like, single player and co-op objective campaign stuff. Really getting soundtrack, great style. Again, the full multiplayer suite. I think the multiplayer suite in Time Splitters 2 is, like, slightly better, but there's still, like, so much to do. They also, like, they have this, like, throwback thing where they actually brought back, like, the weird single player levels from, like, Time Splitters 1, and you can use those in the level editor and stuff like that. It's just such a good soundtrack. Time Splitters was also defined by just having, like, dozens of multiplayer character skins, and Time Splitters 2 was really expansive. Time Splitters Future Perfect is nuts, though. I think there's like 300-400 skins. It's more than that. And despite I remember the developers during the time of Time Splitters 2 said that they couldn't model first person arm animations for every character. They figured out how to do it because Future Perfect has in-game hand models for every character. So they figured out a way of just, like, modeling the same animation, like, models from, like, the models that are running around and using those. There's so much replay value. The core shooting's so good. The writing is so good as well. Like, I can't praise it enough. It was always, like, hinted at in Time Splitters 2, but you got so little of it because it was mostly just in the level intro cutscenes. But Time Splitters, you get it all the way through, and all the, like, the weird kind of gimmicky stuff you can do in levels. It's just so fun, and giving those characters that you were playing as in 1 and 2 being the sidekicks means that they can, like, instead of, like, you taking on their roles, you get to see them doing stuff and talking and reacting to you. It's such a fun take, and it's so depressing what happened with Time Splitters, where they announced Time Splitters 4, but no publisher wanted it. They were like, no, Halo and Call of Duty, those are the big things. We just want you to make gritty shooters. And then they tried to make one, and Ubisoft kind of fucked the studio over, and fucking Haze got made, which is terrible. And then that killed the studio, and then they were stuck as, like, a Crytek support studio for a while. And most of the original devs are gone, and then fucking Embracer Group tried to reform them to let them make a new Time Splitters game, and because of their stupid fucking investments that blew up and they lost billions of dollars, they've shut, like, half their studios, including the Time Splitters studios that hadn't even put anything out yet. It's just, it's so depressing. And then there is the fan, like, project that's supposed to be, like, the PC remaster that's going to have, like, all the game's content in one game, like, as a multiplayer suite, that every so often gets, like, progress updates, but who knows? That thing's been in development, I feel like, for over a decade now. I'd love for it to finally come out, but who knows? I don't even know how they still have the license for it. Like, who even, like, because, you know, that was when Crytek gave them the approval. Okay, so I think I'm going to put this to kind of represent all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games on PS2. But this is the one that's based on the weird CGI movie from, like, the late 2000s. But the ones I'm thinking of are the Konami ones that were based on the animated show from the early 2000s I watched. I think if they have co-op, I'm going to try them with my nephew. My nephew's quite young still. I'm kind of wondering if he would ever want to try doing filmed content with me. Obviously, I wouldn't want him to be on camera unless he wanted to bag up or something. Because I think when you're that young, you can't really consent to your identity being online. And it wouldn't be something I'd stream. But I've always wondered, give him a couple years, because he's like 6.5 right now, closer to 7. I think he's a bit too young for it. But I do want to give those Konami era TMNT games a try, the PS2 ones, and this one as well, because I hear it's okay. Ah, yeah, the Tomb Raider games. Okay. Angel of Darkness. I feel very confident in putting this here. Infamously bad. Really messy development story. I know Bad Game Hall of Fame shoutouts did a full playthrough of this a couple of months ago, which I need to finish watching. Shoutouts to the old man who says, "Leave me alone, I'm busy," and then never does anything. Was supposed to be like an action art, like supposed to have like full RPG elements and like way more globetrotting and all this stuff that got cut because the main core design team were like churning out Tomb Raider games yearly because the main publisher mandated they had to. They got burnt out. Like most of the people who worked on Angel of Darkness were new hires, and the swap to PlayStation 2, just like none of them knew what to do. They gave them like the Tomb Raider PS1 engine, and it was like, we can't use this, we have to start from scratch, and sounds like a nightmare, really. And then from here on, these are the Eidos Montreal developed games that I want to try. No, I think I actually own the 360 version. I have the 360 version of this. And I think I have the 360 version of either Legends or Underworld. Which is the game I remember playing a demo of. And the main gimmick with it was like, yo, we have this dirt tech. Dirt can like stick to Lara. And we do dirt simulation. Like you can see it a bit on the cover. That's the main thing going on. But I do want to give these a try. It's kind of funny, we recently got the Tomb Raider 1 through 3 remaster, because this is like a Tomb Raider 1 like remake. But there's also like a HD trilogy that has remasters of these, and then just the PS3 version of this. But I want to kind of see how this version holds up to the PS3 360 version. But this is definitely gonna go into the random PS2 bucket, because I'm just curious, like, because I think Tomb Raider, especially the core design era games, are looked in this kind of like cool for the time, but like I don't think people have a very positive feeling about how it actually controlled and played in the modern context. I mostly have only played the reboot series, both the first Tomb Raider and then Rise of the Tomb Raider. I still need to play Shadow of the Tomb Raider. But I really like those reboots. I specifically played the PS4 remaster that adds like tons of content. That's definitely the version to play. But Rise of the Tomb Raider is great. Like it's obviously it's a bit derivative of what Uncharted was doing, but it expands on that in a really fun way to give it like a bit more progression and character customization. I'd say like the characterization of Lara in the first game is a bit bland, but she's really cool in the second one, where she's like kind of like jaded and battle hardened and stuff. Really fun. Ah, yes, here we go. Here we go. This is why I knew, even though I didn't have that much left on the list, that I had a lot to say about these final couple of tiers of series. Okay, we've got a lot to talk about here. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. I know where this is going. Boom. Tony Hawk, the Tony Hawk games, made by Neversoft, another rest in peace studio. It's amazing when you think about like where extreme sports games and skateboarding games were at the time, how much they kind of like established the genre and reinvented the wheel of like, look, this is how these games play. Even like Skate to a certain extent, obviously how much of a departure it is, has some DNA from the Tony Hawk games in there. And Tony Hawk's, the games were just on an up and up for so long. Like, Tony Hawk's 2 was obviously such an upgrade, but 3 is like, took the formula, you know, where times Tony Hawk's 2 added the manual and that started to really expand like how the combo system worked. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, adding the revert, the more expansive maps, like even more expanding on kind of the levels, transforming in secret areas, and having the game run at 60 FPS as well. This is such an amazing package, a great set of levels. Like, it's... I can't really think of a level in Tony Hawk's 3 that I would say is a stinker. The only thing is like it's weird. It's a weird thing. My memories of the game are mostly from the PS1 version because I didn't get a PS2 until sometimes around like late 2002, early 2003. Probably 2003. It's kind of hard to figure out exactly when I got it. But some of the PS1 levels were a little more interesting takes on the game, but just the main levels, like how expansive they are, how fun the objectives are, just the general physics. Like, Tony Hawk's from here onwards would have to start kind of messing with the formula and reinventing what they had done. But in terms of what Tony Hawk's 1 had laid the groundwork and Tony Hawk's 2 had built on, 3 is the refinement of that system. It's the peak of the kind of 2-minute session runs with the objectives and the campaign. It also has the fun thing where the different skater types, where there's like street, vert, and hybrid, they would have like slightly, like they'd have the same, most of the same objectives, but there were slight variants of like where stat points were and some stuff like that. It is the perfection of that system, and it is, the gameplay is so solid, it's so tight that it still holds up today on PlayStation 2. Obviously the PlayStation 1 version is a very scuffed version that, outside of the novelty, is not really the version to play anymore. I have fondness for it, but obviously if you're gonna go back to this game, like if you've never played any of the games, you could go pick this up and I think you would be like, oh, this is amazing. Like, there's not much holding it back. Like, the frame rate is really sharp, the soundtrack is obviously from the era, but they actually do a good job of picking music from like multiple eras as well. Like, Tony Hawk always did this good job of like, yes, there was current music, but they would also go to some like classic punk and hip hop and metal and rock that would kind of give the soundtracks a more timeless feel, because it was like, oh, these are both classics from the current, like, that are now classics, but also classics at the time, you know? And God, it's like, it's almost like hard to kind of put into words why Tony Hawk's 3 works so well. But taking that basic formula that Tony Hawk's 1 started, the manual let you link all these street combos together, and then the revert gave you a way to link vert stuff together. And obviously there are little increments beyond this that added to the series. But, you know, it's like 3D fighters when they figured out how to do like sidestepping or wall combos. It's such a big leap. And again, it's just like these levels hold up, the controls hold up. You know, like when you play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2, and then if you go and played like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 on PS2, you notice that they feel very similar. Now, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 has some mechanics from like up until like Tony Hawk's Underground, I believe. Actually, probably Fug 2, because I think it has the like the wall jump, like sticker slap move or whatever. Though it doesn't have the the spin, but I don't blame them for that. But you could go back to this game and just like the levels are so fun, and the unlockables and all the weird like ways to expand levels in secret areas. It's just, it holds up so well. Like in terms of that formula of having like, here's 2 minutes to get these goals in one run, this was the perfection of that formula. And straight up, I do not blame them for like changing the course from here. You could not have done another game that just had like the classic style goals and build on the system a bit. So then we get Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. Now, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 started to add a lot more character to the series. So, for example, characters would give you actual... So instead of having a 2-minute timer, you could free roam around the levels, which were even bigger than Tony Hawk's 3. And characters would give you objectives. They would actually describe the objectives. They would give you a goal camera to show you where to go. Instead of having like each character run through a campaign, it was one big unified campaign, which was a smart. Both, you know, having goals being like pickable objectives on the map, having goal cameras, having like a big team-based campaign where it was like, okay, you would go through, you could play as a pro or you could play as your own character, and then each character would have like a unique pro goal you could unlock near the end. However, I'm gonna put this in the great tier and not the masterpiece tier. And the reason why is, though the levels in the game are really good, it's not a consistent quality. A couple of the levels are more letdowns. San Francisco stands out as like a pretty weak level, where like there's some good lines, but most of the level feels just like more of a street than it does an actual skate course. There's also far less levels. I think there's only like 8 levels total, and the unlockable level, which is a level from Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX 2, just doesn't feel right. Like they actually build objectives and stuff, but it clearly is like, it just doesn't work in this engine. It doesn't feel right. It feels like you're too small. This feels like you're supposed to be doing this on a BMX. So yeah, I think you only get like 8 levels and then the one unlockable area. There are a lot of unlockable skaters, and having all the skaters have dialogue, and the change to the campaign is smart. I just wish it had like 1 or 2 more levels, and that the San Francisco level was better. Now, don't get me wrong, the San Francisco level does have some like really fun goals to do on it. But just as like a general level, like most of it is like either you do tricks up on the high wires, or you go to kind of like the secret side area that has like the S-shaped combo like robot rails, where you just go back and forth between like 2 quarter pipes and rails. And then most of the rest of the level is just this big like C-shaped road, and then kind of this weird like courtyard area that's not that skatable unless you're in like the street competition mode. It's so close though. Also, it gets way too hard. It just doing like the base goals is fine, but if you once you get past the amateur goals and you get onto the pro goals, where you can go back to the previous levels and they have new goals available, some of those are so hard. Even some that aren't pro levels, like some of the goals in London, some of the ones like Bam's goal, some of them are so hard. And I've watched some streams by a guy called Andy THPS, who was like one of the like high combo in scene guys who eventually got hired by Neversoft. And he talked at that the devs always looked at Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 as the threshold of, we went too far in terms of the difficulty. Like, if it can never be at this level, we pushed things too hard. Obviously, players who were familiar with the series were getting better, but obviously newer players were going to come in. And even for veteran players, like, some of the goal requirements are so hard in 4. I just realized as well, I haven't talked about that there were some smart additions to the control system, which again makes this game so close to the masterpiece level. We have grind and lip transitions, which means that while you're grinding or doing a lip, you can swap to a different grind without jumping off the rail, which is good because in Tony Hawk's game logic, jumping on the same rail multiple times makes your balance meter harder to control. They added the spine transfer, which was probably, like, it's not as a big of a change as something like the revert, but it's like a small quality of life feature that actually really improves things. What the spine transfer does is it lets you, if there are like 2 quarter pipes that are parallel but facing away from each other, the spine transfer allows you to go up 1 quarter pipe and transition in the air down onto the bottom one, and you could both go either adjacent or you could go around the corner, and it just opened up more ways for combos to continue. And then they also added the flatline stuff, which, funny enough, again, I grew up with the PS1 version, did not have the flatland system. Though, weirdly enough, it is in the Game Boy Advance version. No, the flatland stuff ends up not being actually that good in, like, the meta of combo building, because it gives you such a massive speed penalty on your manual that the only reason to really do it is if you have, like, nothing left, or to do it as part of the goals, really. But it was still just like, hey, you know, like, it felt like an important addition just because of all the crazy stuff that Rodney Mullen was doing flatland-wise. And it was great to, like, see that represented in the game outside of just doing specials. Especially because, like, manual specials, again, were not really that useful for building score. So it felt like, oh, this is an opportunity to let you do, like, the anti-Casper and the Casper and truck stands and headstands and that kind of stuff. But yeah, if the level design was a bit more, if they were all as good as the best levels in the game, but there are a couple of ones that are like letdowns, and the bonus level just being a Matt Hoffman level was really a big letdown for me. In fact, I'd say like the PS1 version has better bonus levels, personally. And then that brings us on to Tony Hawk's Underground, which was probably the biggest step up in the series, where like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, with the, instead of having classic goals, you picked your goals in levels. You had these expanded levels that were starting to feel like closer to real locales. I think Underground actually perfects the formula that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 was going for. Instead of like having this kind of team story, you make your own character and they go through a skater story, and they build a really fun, compelling story of starting out in the slums and then turning pro, making a foil out of Eric Sparrow. If you know, you know. Really great level design, keeping all the like smart additions to the formula that Tony Hawk's 4 did. You know, goal cams, picking your objectives. Also, they got to the point where, you know, like Tony Hawk's 4, you didn't have to do every goal to get through the game. Tony Hawk's Underground also had the smart addition where you actually had a difficulty selector, so you could go through the campaign with harder or easier goals as well. So it was more completable without kind of that difficulty of Tony Hawk's 4 being required. It also added the off-the-board controls, which I think for some people pre-release seemed like a bit silly. But considering the more kind of structured single-player campaign where you're free roaming levels and finding things, it made sense, but also just how they integrated it into the combo system. You know, like, oh, jump off your board and run to this other area and then jump back on and you can continue your combo and climb up buildings and stuff. I think personally for me, this perfected what Tony Hawk 4 was going for. And it is just a really, like, it's surprisingly how good of, like, a kind of serious grounded story mode. Obviously, there's some really out there stuff that the story goes through. But it's mostly, like, very grounded, but still fun. I think the only thing that was probably like, oh, this could have been a nice addition is you can unlock some classic Tony Hawk levels in the game, but they don't have any objectives on them. They're just for like doing a 2-minute run or free skate. But this was also the part of like, oh, we're going to remake classic Tony Hawk's levels in like the PlayStation 2 engine. There is some stuff in Underground that doesn't work. They randomly added drive-in minigames that really don't need to be there. they're okay, but they're just definitely like, yeah, you could have just made like better skating objectives or something than like spending this time building like a drive-in module that doesn't even work that well. Also, you know, up until this point, the series had character creator. It also had level creator. Tony Hawk's Underground expanded that even more, where you now had special trick creators, where you could make air specials. I can't remember how many types you could make. They kind of expanded that a bit later on. But you could definitely make air specials, and you could make some goofy ass shit. Just like, I'll do a 900 rotation in half a second and stuff like that. But you could do some really fun stuff with it. But they also had create a goal where you could make your own campaign, where you could make like 10 goals on every stage, where you could go up to a person, you could write dialogue for them, and you could set parameters for goals of like, yeah, do this trick on this between these areas and hit this score limit, things like that. It's still it's so sad to this day. I had a nearly complete, like, every level created goal, like, campaign I was making. It had its own little narrative that I swear I would not have deleted, but I don't know where they've gone. And I think it's just, there's a PlayStation 2 memory card that is, like, lost somewhere in the house. Like, it's behind a wardrobe, or it's under a cupboard, or it's gotten stuck under a carpet somewhere. That has all my old, like, Tony Hawk's Underground, Underground 2, American Wasteland saves that have my custom characters, have my custom campaigns, and even custom parks that I need to find. Some other games as well, like I think my Burnout saves would be on that card that I just swear I would not have deleted, but I can't find it. And it's just so depressing, because I would love to go through those again and just see, like, what did teenage me come up with? Were these goals interesting, or were they terrible? How was my writing? I remember I did have a self-inserted character who was like, hey, I'm the game designer. And I would show up on each level and give, like, a special goal. Where I was like, here, you're doing well. Here's a goal for you to do. Okay. Now we have Underground 2. Now this might be a bit controversial, but I'm going to explain this. Hold on, where did Tony Hawk's Pro Skate 4 go? Oh, there. Whoops. So, here's why. So, Tony Hawk's Underground 2, I think in terms of the actual systems, like, you know, like the skating and the level design, Tony Hawk's Underground 2 is probably considered the peak. And the main addition this added was probably the wall jump, aka the sticker slap. There was also the Nada spin, which I personally think is like, doesn't really add anything to it. But The sticker slap is good because it probably fixed like the last kind of like momentum stopper, which was like heading head first into a wall, giving you an opportunity to like bounce back off of a wall. But it definitely has like the tightest skating controls, and the levels included are really good. It also has the full classic mode, and that brings back a ton of really good Tony Hawk levels from Tony Hawk. I think like 1, 2, 3. I don't think anything for Underground, but definitely like 1, 2, and 3. However, you know, I've got to judge this as a whole package. And I remember when Tony Hawk's Underground 2 came out, if you went into a game store that sold used games, I remember about a week after this game came out, they would have entire shelves of just Underground 2. Like, just one game that loads of people had traded in, because this was beyond the era where you could refund a physical game because you didn't like it. At this point, companies, retailers were like, no, we don't do that anymore. We'll only refund if the game doesn't work. Underground 2 is definitely, like, in terms of trying to do a story mode and the tone of stuff, is definitely the jump the shark moment. They leaned really heavy into the, like, 2000s Jackass, Viva La Bam, Road Trip, like the movie Road Trip kind of humor. You know, like the previous games were mainly just T for team because they would have blood in them and they would have like mild cursing in the music. But Tony Hawk's Underground 2 was actually trying to be a bit like grody and like, yeah, dude, yeah, hey, butt nugget. And the actual single-player campaign, like, you completely lose the seriousness of Underground. You have a custom character, but they don't really have a personality anymore. The changes to how the campaign works, where instead of, like, you running up to people and they give you a mission, most of the objectives are more like just and I get the change. It's meant to be that you're supposed to be able to do the goals without having to go up to an NPC and start them. The problem is, you don't get the goal camera anymore. You don't get an explanation of like, hey, here's what you have to do. You have to go into the pause menu and you get a vague hint. It feels like they tried to turn it into a collectathon and it just doesn't really work. There are still some goals where you go up to an NPC and they'll give you an objective and you have so long to do it. But most of them are just like in the world and they're not very well explained. And also just the tone of it, like it's so try hard. Their whole kind of like level destruction gets really goofy in Underground 2 of like, oh, activate this like Civil War era cannon and knock over a porta potty and knock, like, it's definitely just like trying way too hard to be funny, trying to kind of hit that like Viva La Bam road trip kind of humor, and it really just doesn't work. It's just a shame because the actual levels themselves and the actual skating is great, but actually going through the single player campaign story is not. It's really a letdown. There's not really any interesting stakes. There's no like threat. There's no real rivalry. Like, yeah, you're competing as a team, but it's all predetermined, like what team you're on and what events happen. But like it's all kind of like a friendly competition, and it's all meant to just be like goofy and Bam going all that kind of shit. And this is coming from someone who, you know, definitely was a fan of some of Bam's work from like that Viva La Bam era. Back when, you know, obviously before a lot of his like mental breakdown stuff happened. back when obviously he kind of portrayed himself as like a dumbass idiot, but actually, you know, had a lot of creative chops. Like, you have to remember, like, he had, obviously it was a comedy band, but he had Narkill. But, like, before then, he was, like, a movie maker. He made and edited all of the CKY tapes. He made, like, 2 comedy movies on his own. Like made his own production company and edited stuff himself and got, like, licensed soundtracks and things like that. And as an entrepreneur, like, businessman kind of thing, like, that stuff was really impressive. But you would not get that impression from his characterization in, like, Underground 2. It was like the slenderization of, like, what his, like, on TV camera persona was. And just, yeah, it really holds the game back. You do get some cool stuff. Like I said, you get the classic mode, where you get, like, you get to go back to the Tony Hawk's 1 through 3 formula, both playing on the Underground 2 levels, a couple of remade Tony Hawk's 1 and 2 levels, some Tony Hawk 3 levels, and an extra level you unlock, the Bermuda Triangle level that you unlock at the end. I'm trying to remember if it's Underground or Underground 2 that has the, like, 3 Stages of Hell level. That's not very good as well. Like, it is a huge package, and again, you get the create a character, create a board. I think, oh, yeah, the create a board, I believe, was in Underground, but you get that again. You get multiple creator tricks. You can also, like, they added, you know, it doesn't really do anything, but there's, like, goals around, spray painting like a decal on a wall, and you can make a custom decal. As an overall package, it's great. Just the amount of content that's there. Though I will say that the classic campaign doesn't, the goal placement feels like it was made with a character with full stats in mind. Like, they're surprisingly, like, really hard. I guess what they did is because they knew you had, like, the off-the-board controls, they kind of adjusted it of, like, oh, well, remember, the people can get off the board so they can kind of climb up to any rail they want. But it kind of makes it that if you want to do, like, 100% goals, it feels like you have to, like, go through it, level up, and then go back. Which is a bit weird, because that feels kind of, like, anti to how each level was meant to, like, be a progress of, like, getting harder and harder. Whereas Tony Hawk's Underground 2's, like, classic mode feels like you're kind of already at, like, the end game from the start. I guess because they thought people would play it after beating the main campaign. But if you kind of start from there, it kind of just throws you in head first. It's definitely not as hard as the hardest stuff from Tony Hawk's 4. But it's still, like, not quite as tuned as I would want it to be. And then also shout outs to the PSP version that actually added, like, extra levels to the single player. It didn't unfortunately fix the main issues that the single player has. But just, you know, hey, here's even more extra content. Okay, American Wasteland. So I remember at the time, I actually liked American Wasteland more than I liked Underground 2. It actually brings back the Tony Hawk Underground style, like, go up to an NPC, get an objective. It was also their attempt to kind of link the levels together. It wasn't really open world per se, but it was like, here's an open map, and then here's a corridor you go through that's like a kind of like a mini downhill course that loads you into the next level. But I replayed it a couple years ago, and it's actually not... It's still pretty good. Like, I would say it's better than good. It's kind of like on the low end of great. But having said that, the actual levels are not great. Like, they're all street courses as opposed to, like, feeling like they were built for skating in mind. it felt like they were more focused on like, well, we're trying to build like a city here, so we've got to kind of cover New York districts. The levels that are actually good are the ones that were reused from Tony Hawk's Underground 2 Remix, basically, where like they brought back levels from that game. They also brought back a level, weirdly enough, an exclusive level from the Xbox version of Tony Hawk's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Weirdly enough. The actual story of the campaign is fun. I'll give it that. But the actual levels are just aren't very good. There's not a lot of actual scalable terrain. Most of them you have to get like really high up. They've built the levels in a way where it's like they're mostly built just for the objectives as opposed to like being scalable outside of the objectives. A lot of the changes, you know, where they try to kind of flesh out the off the board mode to have like tricks involved in it, feel very janky. It definitely feels like this is where the annual release schedule really was put in Neversoft in a bad spot, where they could add new stuff but they couldn't refine it. And obviously every sequel had to have new stuff. They couldn't just stick with the same formula and refine it. A lot of the cutscene presentation in Tony Hawk's Underground in American Wasteland is really janky. You don't really get motion captured cutscenes very often. They're kind of done with these weird jerky looking in-game animations that don't transition properly. The actual levels don't feel that great to skate in. The changes to the parkour system, like they don't feel fully fleshed out. It feels like what the game was supposed to have like, oh, here's a mode that feels like you're skating but you're off the board. So like, oh yeah, if you do a wall run and then jump off a wall and do a flip and a grab, you get points for it. But there's no real actual utility for it. And it's the same with like again, the open world is a neat idea. I just wish the levels in it were better, because it feels like they were just kind of making street levels and not proper scalable levels. Like the best levels in the game are like the skate park and the casino level taken from Remix, and the upgraded oil rig taken from Tony Hawk's 3 on Xbox. It does have what I think is a better classic mode than Underground 2. However, it's too short. Again, it's mostly built from old levels and levels from Underground 2 Remix. Though it does have like one new level. But yeah, it's a bit too short. I think it's only like 6 levels long. And they did the weird thing where there were like 3 extra classic levels that were only in like a collector's edition, even though they're technically on the disc still. Whereas they should have just kept them in all versions and made that part of the classic mode. And I think the only other new thing they really added... Oh yeah, also in the single player, you have very limited character customization options. You can't make a custom character completely. You have to start with a preset and then like earn money and then you can customize them. And they kind of stripped out a lot of the more interesting character customization items as well. It is fun that they added like a BMX system. It's just a shame that like it's basically almost entirely optional beside one objective. Like if they'd like built it into more levels, it would have been a thing, but it's basically just like again, most of the game feels like undeveloped. Like the actual ideas they had does not feel like they had enough time to flesh them out. Now, I do think that the games on 7th gen, Project 8 and Proving Ground, actually did work to build on the kind of campaign open world formula. Unfortunately, they have their own issues where like they didn't really come up with any new gameplay mechanics that really built on mechanics. Project 8 added the Nailer trick, which was like a kind of like a prototype system of what Skate would do. But you know, it was kind of just like a weird extra gimmick. It has a great level, like it's actually feels like a proper open level, and the actual levels are like really good skateboarding levels. It's just really poorly optimized because there's absolutely, you know, the way the level's laid out is it is literally just here's like 10 Tony Hawk levels placed next to each other. There's no like accounting for streaming data in. And also there's not really a story in Project 8. And then Proving Ground does have a really good kind of story thing going on. But again, most of the new gameplay systems, like, hey, having the extra nail trick modes is cool. But then, like, body checking and bowl carving are, like, completely forgettable. The only one that's, like, kind of useful is the like, faster kicking speed. And then, though it's an interesting idea of being able to build and put rails down in the open world, it's way too limited, unfortunately. But we're going to talk about the PS2 versions of these, and these are not good. I might have some nostalgia for the PS1 versions of 3 and 4, which were kind of interesting, being like conversions of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, but with like the levels and mechanics from 3 and 4. These games, unfortunately, are just kind of broken. They're like really badly scaled back. Instead of kind of just using the previous engines and kind of just doing a more like instead of doing like an underground throwback or something, they try to emulate the next gen feel and weight, and it just doesn't really come out right. Like, obviously the open world stuff isn't there, and I can't fault them for that. But they run really bad, they look really ugly, and the physics are off, because instead of like rebuilding levels to make them work in the engine, they instead try to make the engine work in these old levels, and it just doesn't come together right. Like, when I wanted to try these for the first time, I was really hoping I was going to get versions of these games that felt like Underground and Underground 2. And that's just not what these are at all. We will cover these on Johnny Backhead's Not Pro Skater series, though. I won't say specifically, but there is a musical number I want to do for the restream of Tony Hawk's 3. But I haven't played bass in a while, and I've had to retrain my fingers. Turns out that I need to recondition them. I don't know how well it will come up on camera. Hang on. No. My color correction is too bright. I've slightly blistered my fingers from playing bass again. I've got to practice a bit more. But I do want to get back into the Tony Hawk's Not So Pro Skater series, because eventually we can cover these versions and I can really showcase like how off they are, like how kind of buggy and janky they are. Like you could say what you want about Tony Hawk's 3 and 4 on PS1. They don't feel buggy and janky. They just feel like uncanny, because again they feel like D-makes. These don't feel like D-makes. they feel like really badly ported code, I guess. Alright, Tourist Trophy. This is the Superbike spin-off to the Gran Turismo series that people have kind of forgotten about, that I've played a little bit of, but I need to play more. Alright, True Crime. Streets of LA. So, I've kind of messed around with this a bit. I think I want to replay it. But I really liked this game at the time. You know, obviously it was again a take on the Grand Theft Auto formula, but trying to build it out into a more like third-person action shooter game, because it both has like fist fighting and shooting stuff, as well as some like Max Payne like shoot dodging. But I remember at the time being really fun. It also has like a ridiculously huge, both this game and New York have really ridiculously big maps, and in fact there's evidence that the New York map was supposed to be even bigger, because you can access the debug mode and go out of bounds, and like entire districts of like Brooklyn and and shit are like completely mapped out, and NPCs are able to spawn there, and traffic works there. It's crazy. But this game feels kind of like a Hong Kong action take on Grand Theft Auto, and I remember having a really fun time with it. But I do need to see if it actually holds up, because in my head it feels like a really cool take on like the Matrix style of gameplay. You know, it's got bullet time dodging. It has the whole thing of like you can pick up weapons that enemies drop and use them until the clip runs out and throw them away. I specifically remember you could dual wield shotguns, which was really funny, and do like dive shots with them. But I would have to replay through it to see. I don't think I could put it into great, because admittedly I have replayed it a bit, and there is some kind of jankiness to it. Some of the aiming control feels a bit off. Getting upgrades is a bit grindy, because you have to go and do like free roam crime fighting to earn shields, but then you only get, when you go to try like the shooting range or the dojo, you get one attempt and that uses up your shield, so you can like, it gets really grindy at points. But I do remember getting all the gun upgrades being really fun, because it actually upgrades like your base weapons. Like you start with revolvers, and then they get like attachments every time you get upgrades and stuff. And then you eventually like level up to better base handguns. So it feels almost like it's got RPG elements. Obviously, maybe not obviously, but just straight up, Sleeping Dogs, which originally did start out as a true crime game, is probably the better take on what true crime was going for, specifically this one, because True Crime New York doesn't really have the kung fu Hong Kong action movie vibe that True Crime LA does. Also, you can unlock and play as Snoop Dogg in this game if you want. But who knows? Here's the thing, because of the soundtrack and stuff, I wouldn't stream it, but I might replay this whole game and see how I feel, if it would still be there or not. Ah, yes, the Thai games. Thai to Tasmania, mate. Okay. I want to check these out, just because even though I didn't play them at the time, I actually really got into these kind of like 3D mascot platformers later on. You know, Ratchet and Clanks, Daxters, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, these are just ones I want to check out for sure. These are going to be on the roulette wheel as well, or however we do it. Oh yes, Ultimate Spider-Man. This one I want to check out. I didn't actually realize that this was the true follow-up to the Treyarch Spider-Man 2 formula, because Spider-Man 3 deviates a bit, whereas this was like a spin-off that tried to build on the swinning that game had, though it's based on like a different universe. I believe this is Unlimited Saga. I think this is going to be a might play. Again, I believe it's an RPG. It's just one I don't know much about. Ah, yes, the herbs. The Sims in the city. So, I'll be honest, I really like this game. I don't know if I would put it in the great. This is another game that I want to replay and see how I feel about it now. But this was taking where the console Sims games were going and taking it to the ultimate extreme. I actually don't know if this has a PC version. I'm curious about that, actually. I might look that up now. How am I doing on music? Okay, yeah, we've got plenty of music left. Does it have a PC version? No, it doesn't. Yeah. GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. And then, like, yeah, mobile game spin-offs. But yeah, so this was an attempt to kind of build a console-specific experience. So the Herbs is less of a, like, life house simulation. And it's more of a, like, a socialite click simulator. So it still does have, like, a house where you can build out objects and stuff. But your main concern isn't really the, like, entertainment, like, all your, like, health stuff of, like, oh, your toilet meter, your reading meter, hygiene, like, that stuff's still there. But your main thing is about schmoozing with these different cliques and subcultures. Where there'll be like a metal area and a trance area, rave area, hip-hop area. And it's a really fascinating take on The Sims. Where it's more... it's kind of funny because it's kind of like a poser simulator. Because you'll go to this area and it's like, oh, this is a bike area. So you have to like... start to dress and act in a certain way that will mean that the locals will take you in. And then it also had like a lot of like little mini games, like QTEs and little mini games to earn money and stuff. Obviously the name's really funny. The Herbs. It's like, oh, it's like the hip urban Sims. Also notable that the Black Eyed Peas are in the game, playing themselves. And will.i.am actually remixed Black Eyed Peas songs into Simlish. This was also the point where like they actually got like licensed music and like remixed it to make it Simlish, but it actually features straight up just like music from the Black Eyed Peas. But I do really like this game. Just because it is such a fun, quirky take on The Sims, where it's more kind of like about schmoozing with these different subcultures, and they'll give you like little quests and stuff. So it's like an adventure game take on The Sims formula, which again, like I said, the console versions of The Sims were having those kind of quest modes added, and this was like a game built just on the quest mode. But who knows? Maybe I'd replay it, not feel the same way. Also, I'm noticing again that this apparently has iToy support, which is just always funny to see. Oh yeah, Valkyrie Profile 2. Might play this. Again, I need to talk to someone who knows about all these PlayStation 2 RPGs that I missed out on. You know, Arc the Lad, Shin Megami Tensei, Sokoden, Tales of the Abyss, Rogue Galaxy, Dark Cloud. There's so many of those, you know? Alright, Van Helsing. You might be confused why I put this on the list, but I'm not. So, Van Helsing, obviously tie-in to the movie, which is not well liked. This game, however, is straight up a Devil May Cry clone. In every sense of the word. I don't know if it has like a full-on style meter, but it plays like specifically Devil May Cry 1 or Devil May Cry 3. It doesn't feel like 2. Like, it has the same structure as like a Devil May Cry 3. And heck, even like some of the moves look like they're like based on animations from Devil May Cry. In fact, we might play this quite soon. I want to go back to Action Sack and kind of cover the PlayStation 2 era Devil May Cry clones. And I want to cover this. It doesn't seem like that well reviewed, but I feel like it might actually be better than people give it credit for, based off what I've played. But we'll give this an honest try. But this might show up soon. Just be prepared. Ah, yes, Beautiful Joe. Beautiful Joe. So, we'll cover it again on Action Sack, but I have played this one myself. This is, Hideki Kamiya after Devil May Cry. Obviously, that got taken over by a different team, and, he wanted to kind of continue his, stylish action stuff. And this is kind of like a side-scrolling and beat-em-up take on the Devil May Cry formula. Oh, that's a good question, Soul Stuff. Would you rate better this version or the GameCube version? Unfortunately, I have not played the GameCube version, so I can't say. The GameCube versions are quite expensive compared to the PS2 versions. And admittedly, you don't get... The PS2 version of Beautiful Joe 1 does have some extra content. Now, that being said, Beautiful Joe on PS2 does have some frame drops. However, I don't know visually how much different they are. So, I would have to kind of do some, side-by-side research, but I'm not under the impression that the gameplay is dramatically changed. But, that aside, due to the cube rendering stuff, the game looks beautiful on GameCube. It might do, yeah. I've not played it on GameCube. I'd have to look at some really good comparison stuff. But outside of that stuff, just as a general game, Beautiful Joe is great. It's a really cool take on the Devil May Cry formula, taking that and turning it into side-scrolling. All the wacky stuff with the time powers and the dodging, and obviously the Super Sentai inspiration. It's a shame that it didn't do that well. This was just the curse with obviously this was pre-Clover Studio, but it's that kind of era, that style of game, which is kind of crazy because I think Beautiful Joe 1 actually did make more money than they expected, but the series has never, sold that well. No, they've kept trying. They kept trying to, bring it back. Not only is there Beautiful Joe 2, there's Red Hot Rumble, there's the DS one. Capcom had that weird thing where they were taking a lot of the, Clover Studio, that and Okami DS. And it was this is not what people want out of a sequel. They don't want weird DS spin-offs. But it is really fun. Obviously, brutally hard in... Not brutally hard, but hard in the way that Devil May Cry was, but not as hard as that. But definitely kind of the game... You can't cheese it. The game wants you to learn to play the game and then learn how to experiment and freely express in that system. Some people might actually like it a bit more than Devil May Cry because it's probably a bit simpler in execution. But it is really good, and the PS2 version does have the added benefit of Dante being a unlockable player character who has his own moveset. Also has the goofy story where they insert him into the base game cutscenes and then just reverse voice lines from Devil May Cry 1 and write new dialogue for him. And there's a cheeky reference in some of the dialogue where he basically says oh, Devil May Cry 2 Dante is a different guy. That wasn't me in that game. But yeah, super charming art style. To the point where I'm surprised that Beautiful Joe 1 and 2 have never been re-released in an upscaled package. Because you'd probably have to do some work to improve some of the textures. Because at least on PS2, some of the texture work does look a little mushy. But most of the art style, the character models, the 3D elements look so good. And just the whole kind of, you're jumping into a movie, so you're like in a movie studio set that's turned real. It's such a cool look. And all the fun characters and the crazy story that's like a tribute to all these like Sentai Power Ranger shows. There's also the... How does he do it? It's like that. There, that's the beautiful thing. Which, the story behind this, by the way, is Hideki Kamiya wanted to get away with a character flipping the middle finger. And this is how he got away with it. He was like, okay, if I just keep the thumb and the pinky out, it's technically its own symbol. But I highly recommend giving this a try if you've never tried it. Especially if you are a fan of just like weird side-scrolling beat-em-ups. Probably the prime example of like the stylish action side-scrolling beat-em-up. Beautiful Joe 2, however, I have not played yet. I think once I replay Beautiful Joe 1 on stream, that's when I'm going to play it. I hear that the sequel doesn't really add much to the formula outside of just the instant character swapping stuff. But, again, I've not played it myself, so I'm not sure. Oh, yes, okay, Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution. I'm including the original and Evolution in here, because Evolution is basically just an upgraded version. I definitely need to play more, though, because I missed out on Virtua Fighter. I didn't get into Virtua Fighter until Final Showdown on PlayStation 3, which I loved, to be fair. But I never really had an opportunity to play the console ones that had the, like, full kind of, like, arcade tour campaign modes. I've messed with this one a bit, and it does seem really cool. Unfortunately, the PAL version doesn't come with the Virtua Fighter 10th Anniversary disc, or whatever it's called. That has, like, Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution with the, like, Virtua Fighter 1 skin. That was sold separately in PAL region, so I don't have that disc, unfortunately, and it's quite pricey now. But from what I've played of this is great, but I need to play more to really judge it. It would probably... I feel like from what I've played, it would probably nestle quite well around the Tekken Tag, Tekken 4 kind of spots. I just... Again, I would need to sit down and play it for like a week or two. Alright. These Wallace and Gromit games, I believe, were on the original list. And I did love Wallace and Gromit as a kid. I don't actually know if these games are well liked, though. So maybe we'll play them. I need to do more research. Same with the Way of the Warrior games. I only know a little bit about Way of the Warrior. They're kind of like open adventure RPG samurai games, what I understand. I just don't know a lot about them. Same with the Wild Arms series. They're like anime cowboy western RPGs. That might be put on the roulette. Again, some of these I need to do more research on. Oh man, we actually don't have that much left. Okay. And I'll be frank here, most of these games I have not played. So, these are all need to play more. Me and my nephew have loaded these ones up and tried them out. Now, I loved the WWF SmackDown games on PlayStation 1. But, because again, I didn't get the PlayStation 2 until really late, I ended up not catching up on the wrestling games at the time. So I've only really played these more recently. That being said, like, they still seem cool, but again, I would have to properly sit down, like, try out their campaign modes. From what I understand, Here Comes the Pain is typically regarded as the peak of the SmackDown era games. And though there was one of the SmackDown vs. Raw games, the later games, that I did put a lot of time into, mainly for its, like, character creator content. Especially for the time, the character creator stuff was, like, really powerful. And on PS3, it was really fun, because you could put, like, upload songs on your PS3 and use those as, like, entrance themes and stuff like that. I recreated a bunch of like dramatic Dream Team wrestlers. However, this one I just straight up never played, so that one's going there. Obviously, it's got a very unfortunate title, like box art, but what can you do? But yeah, these I just need to play more, to try these ones out more. I forget which one it is that I think in the Bad Gamer Hall of Fame Discord, if it was Shut Your Mouth or if it was just Brinit, where we watched Sharky play the campaign, and definitely some of the character models in this era looked a bit rough. I think like by Here Comes the Pain they kind of worked on them a bit more. But yeah, I just need to go back to these more. But it is fun going back to these and just seeing like the weird time shot that these games had of the rosters. I'm just like, oh, when was this made? Oh, like, okay, this was like just before Invasion, or like this was when the Invasion was dying down, and things like that. Alright, X-Men Legends. These are the action RPG games. These are plan to plays for sure. I've messed around with Marvel Ultimate Alliance, which was the like follow-up series to these games. But I do want to go back to these ones. I think it's like the second one is actually like really well regarded, where the loot you would get was like based on different eras of like the X-Men characters' costumes, and you could actually like mix and match them and stuff. But again, this is one that I plan on putting on like the roulette reel, where we kind of go through this catalog, which as you can see is quite big. But again, some of these are gonna come up in specific segments on the show. Yes, X-Men's Wolverine, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Yeah, they are the 10 player Marvel Alliance game. Yeah. So this one I randomly loaded up in a Discord a couple of months ago. Obviously the PS3 360 one is really well liked. It's kind of like a fun take on God of War. This game sucks. This game is on PlayStation 2. Came out in like 08, 09 or something. It feels like a... God, it's like... It's so visually ugly. Its frame rate is all over the place. It doesn't have like any camera control. It's all on rails. It feels like... I'm trying to think. Because God of War 1 and 2 are both like so technically more advanced in this game. This game almost feels like a Dreamcast game in terms of its quality. Like, it definitely is trying to do the God of War moveset still, but there's no move list. You just like randomly unlock moves. Level objectives are really vague. A lot of times, just no music is playing in cutscenes or in gameplay. It just feels like they forgot to put music in. It just feels unfinished. And I believe the Wii version is again built on this. You just don't have the motion controls. But like, it looks so technically poor compared to what these systems can actually do. Like, again, I can't stress enough, like, the God of War games ran at 60 FPS. Devil May Cry run at 60 FPS. And this game is like technically, on a technical level, like so below those games, and it still runs like shit and looks ugly. It was like shockingly bad. I wanted to highlight that just because of how bad it was. Okay, the Xenosaga games. It's kind of funny because I remember there being like full spread ads advertising some of these games back in the day. Mainly just like, hey, look at this hot anime girl sitting on a motorbike, was basically all the ad was. I've heard from some people that these games do not hold up. That these, like, if you want to get into any Xeno games, like if you want to play them, play Xenogears, play Xenoblade, but skip these ones. I hear they are like grindy and not great. And weirdly enough, like most of them did not even come out in the PAL region. Like I think we only got like this one or something. So it's weird that it was even, like, advertised so heavily. Also, wait, did I not rank 13 already? I guess not. But I'll have to talk to more people who know about PlayStation 2 era JRPGs. Maybe they're worth trying. I don't know. Alright, 13. 13. I know why I'm putting this. 13's great. I think maybe ideally, if you're going to play any version, play it on, like, Xbox. Just because it runs a little better. But I think, like, the texture work's actually, like, not that much changed on the PS2 version. But really cool game based on a French graphic novel. Oh, yeah, don't play the, quote, remake. Such a bizarre game where, like, they were trying to one-to-one remake all the cutscenes, all the levels, but then the graphics were completely new and looked terrible. Like, there was no attempt to match the original art style, even though they used some of the original pre-rendered cutscenes in that. And obviously they blame, oh, you know, lockdown, COVID made stuff hard. It's like, yeah, but you shouldn't have released this. And I know they said they were going to try and fix it. I don't know if that was fixable, because that was like, hey, you need to retexture the entire game. It's also just weird, like, Ubisoft made this, but this remaster was done by a completely different company and not Ubisoft, so maybe they didn't have the rights to use all the assets, but they had the rights to use the original, like, voice work and levels and animation. It was just bizarre. But, like, it's based on a French graphic novel spy thriller that's, like, very kind of James Bondy. And as such, this is basically a take on the kind of PS2 first-person shooter era James Bond games. Like, this feels somewhere between, like, an Agent Under Fire and a Nightfire. Like, it's very much in that area. And also, I just remember being really impressed with it at the time in terms of, like, you know, oh, you can pick people up and take them as hostage and pick up, like, items in the environment and knock them over people's heads, and all the really awesome presentation stuff where they take, like, graphic novel visuals and build it into the gameplay. Like, onomatopoeia sound effects flash on the screen when you, like, hit enemies or they get shot. And the amount of style they put into, you know, like, the sound effects they'll draw coming off of, like, a helicopter or a tank. It's got a really great dynamic kind of, like, cop thriller soundtrack that will, like, kick up tempo and crescendo when battles start, and then when the battle's done, it will, like, dial down and go into, like, sneaky mode. It's a fucking awesome game. Granted, some of the, like, analog aiming will probably feel a bit awkward in modern standards, because it's still that kind of console era where they didn't really know how to do, like, smooth stick aiming. So a lot of the time it was like, you can either move at full speed or you can move at, like, this speed, the cursor, you know. But aside from that, still great. Really unfortunate it did not get the sequel that the game clearly was setting itself up for, because the game ends on a massive cliffhanger. If you want to find out where the story goes, you have to go and find the graphic novel, basically. Because it did not get a sequel. But that shouldn't put you off from playing it. Like, if you've liked any of the PS2 era James Bond games, this is, like, an unofficial kind of attempt at that style. You know, it has the gadgets, it has the set pieces and the style. It's just awesome. Alright, we're almost done here. We have a few more games left. This we streamed during my Scuff era. I'm going to put it here. Now, this seems to be a hot take for some, because a lot of people seem to prefer this over Yakuza Kiwami, which is, like, the kind of semi-remake / Yakuza 0 reskin. here's the thing. So the version I played had the American dub, which is unintentionally hilarious. It is like both poorly acted, mostly poorly directed, I'd say. Some of the choice in like how they localize the dialogue to make it a bit more like Western is just hilarious. Like the amount of cursing and the way they're directed. Like some of the characters are just really miscast as well. And here's the thing. What it was going for, really impressive, but I don't think the whole kind of what the Yakuza formula is now more known for. You know, having Kamurocho be this like expansive living city. It doesn't quite feel like that in the game. There's not a lot to do outside of the main story. And the actual combat is really stiff and awkward feeling. Like, it is really hard to go back to. Yakuza Kiwami being based on the Yakuza 0 engine is kind of unfair because that's like some of the best fighting that they ever did in the series. You know, having the style switching and all that. Yakuza, like, 1 in comparison, like, the melee combat frankly feels dated for PlayStation 2. I hear the sequel really improved on it, and we'll probably see it at some point, because I do want to stream it. But they were going for a lot. They also have the whole kind of, like, the running through the city is done with fixed camera angles, which was probably done because they couldn't manage doing free cam on PlayStation 2 with how dense they wanted the streets to be. Problem is, it makes navigation really awkward at times because it makes a lot of the side paths impossible to see. And there's not quite enough options in the combat to get through some of the encounters very well. It feels like you have to kind of cheese the game to get through encounters. The story itself, like the story and the characters are really good, but if you're going to play... If you really were insist of like, I want to play this original PS2 version, play the undub mod that restores the original voice acting. That's the version to play. But I think if you wanted to get into Yakuza or Like a Dragon, you wouldn't start the PS2 version. I think a lot of people would try this and bounce off it so quick. Because it's got a lot of filler that I personally preferred that in Kiwami was turned into side missions that you could skip if you didn't want to do them. Because Yakuza 1 has this bad habit of like, hey, here's the main plot thread. Hey, just go ahead and do this other plot thread that has no relation to the main story for like 2 hours. Go find out what this like son of a Yakuza boss is doing. Oh, go help this dog that doesn't push the story forward in any way. Like that kind of stuff. But you can see what they're going for. Like the story direction, that's still really cool. It is still like technically impressive how dense they do make the city. Like as limited as the perspective is on it, it does feel very good for the time. I am really curious to see what I think of the PS2 version of Yakuza 2. Because Yakuza 2's story, I think, is even better than Yakuza 1. Like Yakuza 1 is actually quite a simple story. It's just kind of told very slowly. Yakuza 2 is the one where you get like a lot of crazy conspiracy twists and turns. Yakuza 1 just feels a bit slow, where it's like the players figured out what's going on like at chapters, hours before the characters have, kind of thing. But yeah, no, Yakuza 1's combat is hard to go back to. It's crazy to me. I know people who insist that Yakuza 6 combat's worse than Yakuza 1. Those people are mad. I'm sorry. I love you. Hey, keep living your best life. I've played those two games relatively close to each other. That's not true. Yakuza 6 feels like a fucking godsend to compare to Yakuza 1. And yes, Yakuza 6 is a backstep for the series combat-wise. But Yakuza 1 like feels like it barely works. Like you can't, like the lock-on just basically doesn't work half the time. Like it's so hard to stay locked on and hit enemies in that game. It's just bizarre. Alright, and then here's the final 4 games. And to be frank, these are all going in here. Because I've never played Zone of the Enders. Yakuza's not my type of gameplay, but the way everyone talks about it, I want to play it. Well, if you're better with like turn-based RPGs, then you might want to play Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon instead. If you're not into like beat 'em up, action, that kind of stuff, that's the one to play. But mainly, like, they make the combat stuff like pretty easy. Also, Yakuza 1's very grindy. You have to grind a lot to like get your stats up to beat the game. You can't really just power through with like without leveling up. But even if like you're not really into the beat 'em up stuff that much, like Yakuza 5 has so many mechanics outside of that. It has a full racing mode, it has like a hunting simulator mode. And baseball minigame, like the amount of subsystems they started putting into that series is mind-blowing. So yeah, Zone of the Enders, series I've missed. Kind of interesting considering how much I like Kojima Productions stuff. I've always meant to go back to it, but I got the Zone of the Enders HD collection and then held off because it turns out that the launch version of that game is terrible. Luckily, Konami actually hired a different studio to fix it, and that version's good. So I would probably play those versions. I'm just not sure if I would do it as part of this or if I would play them in my own time. But I've missed out on a lot of these kind of like mecha games. And that's the same with with Bloody Roar here. Now, I have played Bloody Roar Primal Fury, which is based on Bloody Roar 3. But I've not played it much. Most of my trying Yakuza 5. Here's the thing. If you want to get into the series and you're not into beat-em-ups, play Yakuza 7. Because that's kind of a fresh start. You don't need to know any of the established story. If you jumped into Yakuza 5, you could enjoy it without knowing any of the pre-existing story, but you are going to be confused. And Yakuza 5's story gets really confusing at times. So, I would probably say play 7. Yeah. If you're worried about not liking the beat-em-up stuff, play 7. And if you do want to try one with the beat-em-up combat, either try Yakuza 0 or try Judgment 1, which is the like spin-off series where it's a like new story and characters, so you don't need to know any existing story. But from all of them I've played, Yakuza 0 is still like the best one in terms of like its style and gameplay and all that. So yeah. Bloody Roar 3. I used to get demos for the Bloody Roar games on PS1, but I never managed to get a hold of any of them. I have played some of the GameCube one, Primal Fury, which from what I understand is typically considered the best version, specifically the Japanese version, because they slightly changed it for the Western release, but I do want to check out the other ones, including Bloody Roar 4 here. Though, having said that, from what I understand, this is kind of one of the weaker ones in the series. Like, probably the weakest, actually. Where it was, like, actually, like, a bit of a step back. Like, it's kind of interesting, because Bloody Roar 1 and 2 had, like, a decent amount of, like, blood violence. Though, obviously, by, like, today's standards, it's... like, it's a lot of blood, but obviously on PS1, it doesn't look gory. And 4 tried to kind of bring it back a bit. As you can see, it actually has an M rating here. Though I think the PAL one is probably like a 16. Okay. So yeah, not too much to say on these. These we're going to have to check out yourself. And like I said, these are duplicates that I accidentally have like 2 images for. But there we go. That's the tier list done. Oh. That took a long ass time. But, look, I knew going into this that there was going to be a lot of games here. But I didn't want to just disregard these. Some of these I hear amazing things about or decent things about. Same with these. Same with these. Like, obviously, we've got the Gran Turismo games. Like, from what I understand, like, 3 and 4 are, like, pinnacle of the series. Def Jam stuff here. Like, there's some really amazing games in these that I've just not put enough time into or never got around to. And what I plan to do, so it'll either I'll set up like one of those spin wheels, but I'm kind of want to do like names in a bag, just to, you know, it's my branding. I gotta keep up my branding. But I want to start a segment where I randomly draw a game from a hat that's from one of these lists, and I play through it on stream or until if it's a bad game, until I can't play it anymore. And then come back and re-rank it in the tier list, you know? And kind of over time, start adding, like, you know, keep building this tier list, because, you know, this is a good amount of masterpieces and great games, but there are definitely more than this on the system, you know? There's definitely way more that, you know, I think like the Gran Turismos could easily be up there. Downhill Domination, from what I've played, I would probably put pretty high. I just haven't played enough to completely judge it. You know, Beyond Good and Evil, Bully I know is really well liked. And you know, there's also like Dragon Quest 7, these Raymans, the Sly Coopers, all the Jack and Daxters, the Ratchet and Clank, Klonoa 2, Need for Speed, Most Wanted. Like, there are some games here that I know are super well regarded in the zeitgeist. And games I know that aren't. But I want to give them a try and just see how people like them. And also, you know, stuff like Fatal Frame we're going to get to, because I've played through Fatal Frame 1 and loved it. God Hand I've messed with a little bit. God of War 2, same there. The Hitman games I've missed out on, but just, there are so many interesting games here that I want to check out. Again, the PlayStation 2 library, I don't think there's any library like it, because there's just been no library that was this expansive that was catering to this audience, because the only other console that has an expansive library is the Wii, but the vast majority of that library were really bad, like, conversions or demakes of, like, PlayStation 3 and 360 games. Some decent, but mostly bad. Or they were, like, casual shovelware people who thought that because Wii Sports and Wii Play and Just Dance sold, like, tens of millions of copies, that fucking Wii Carnival games is going to sell that much as well. It's like, no, obviously not, because it's not as good as any of those. But, again, here, we'll just go through it slowly. I'm still happy with this. I'm sure some people are going to look at these rhythm games and rail shooters and raise an eyebrow. But these are still, like, pinnacles of the series to me. And yeah, you'll probably raise your eyebrow at some of these games that I did not get around to. But that's just the unfortunate thing. You know, time and money is finite. But I think we're going to have a lot of fun bringing up some of these games on stream and seeing what they're like. So, let's just, for prosperity, okay. There we go. Johnny, Bags. Oh. Again, annoying, if I add images, which I added those 2 bloody Raw games, they don't save to the site. I'd have to go and edit the original template and then remake the template as far as I got. It's annoying, sister. I wish there was, like, a local program I could download that would give you more control in editing a tier list. Oh, fuck. Oh, no. OBS just cut out. Why? Okay, well, if you're watching the VOD, I'm still here. I'm just going to save this. There we go. We're going to download the image here. You're not going to see this. I'm not sure if the stream's going to come back. I might just have to end things there. You know what I am going to do? I wonder if I take Bloody Raw 3 and 4 out, if I can save the tier list that way. There we go. We're reconnected. No, it's not letting me. Okay, what? Okay. Well, look. I'm back. I've saved an image of the full tier list, which I will again. I'll post that on Twitter before I go to sleep tonight. I'm going to try and refresh this. There we go. Yes. Okay, so Bloody Raw 3 and 4 won't be on here. Yeah, I don't know why. Just OBS cut out for a sec. But I'm going to make sure I've got a version of this saved to the site. But the version that will be on Twitter will include Bloody Raw 3 and 4. But again, they're just in the plan to play section. Alright. Oh, okay. That took a while. But I'm happy with that. I'm sorry the stream cut there at the end. But again, if you watch the VOD on my YouTube, I have a local recording, so that's going to have the, 1 minute cut out. But yeah, hey. Some of that you're going to think is a hot take. Fucking, I get it. Time Crisis, Parappa the Rapper 2, Guitar Room Man, those being in masterpieces is probably going to be raising eyebrows for some people. But that's just the way things are, you know? Alright, well, this stream went a little longer than I anticipated. But yes, I'll put out more details about it. But look forward to a new segment where we are going to go through these games that I missed out on. I've been slowly adding them to my planned stream list, and I'm gonna add them to a wheel, and we're gonna randomly select them and go through them on stream. I am gonna wrap up though, because I've been nattering and my throat is a little sore, so I want to wrap things up. But I'm pretty sure Bad Game Hall of Fame has started their Euro trip streams, so we're going to raid into those. But there we go. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoy PlayStation 2 games. I've been your host, Johnny Baghead. Don't have a raid message, just go check out Bad Game Hall of Fame. They do great work, and hey, you might one day see me on there. Alright. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.